7 floor.
We'll see you around the timeline. Feels good to be back.
I think that Rollup is one of the most premier media brands in crypto, and Andy and Robbie are great experts at everything they talk about, and it's my favorite podcast.
Adding it to my library as we speak.
Potentially multi-chain deployments.
We are at DevConnect Day 1 here. I'm with Jesse from Base. JP Morgan, BlackRock, DTCC, Fidelity, the entire thing was just institutions. It's next level. This industry is going to the next level. And guys, I don't know what else to say. I'm bullish.
He said it, he finally said it.
I'm so bullish.
Andy's bullish, I'm bullish, we're bullish. Is headed to the top. If we're not already at the top, we're going to the top.
We're going.
Rollup is my favorite.
From all walks of life, all over the world, all over this industry, come together for the Rollup.
Zoom out. The institutions aren't coming. They're simply here. It's the golden age of crypto, guys. Get right. Let's go.
Welcome to the nest. See you on the show. We are.
Happy Tuesday, we're back. Bang.
We are so back.
Bang.
Animal spirits are back.
Is it a bull market or what?
We're about to find out.
Is it a bull market or is it all just a fake liquidity run to get the boys excited at major resistance?
Bouncy balls. Bouncy balls.
Man, Feels good to be back in the
gonna
tower.
find
Shout out
out
to
here.
Plume. Welcome to the Tokenization Tower, the nest where digital assets meet finance. Guys, you're watching the Rollup. It is April 14th. Shout out to Plume. Let's give Plume some love. The boys are out in Bali this week, but we are at home in the Tokenization Tower, Rob. It's a beautiful day out here in New York City.
Beautiful.
Beautiful is right. Winter is over. YC all in on stablecoins? Question mark. Nikita is teasing us. I wonder why. We got VC, Crypto Reset, Paxos Labs with the fundraise, and the quantum debate today here on the Rollup, baby. Wow, a lot of green on that ticker today, Rob.
Oh, yeah.
Except for Arbitrum. Damn, RIP, man. Down 1%. Down 0.5%. What's going on with Arbitrum, Ton? I don't know.
Dang. Infinity Hedge says next up 90K. Agree or
Really?
disagree?
I'm with it, man. I'm with it, man. I think the crypto winter is over, ladies and gentlemen. Today we've got Bhau, Kotecha of Paxos Labs, Alex Pruden of Project 11, and Tom Dunleavy of Varus Capital. It's going to be a good show today. Let's get fired up, baby. We got the new light. We got some more lights coming. We got some more books coming. The whole thing's coming together for the boys and the girls. Let's get into today's topics, what we got going on here in the Tokenization Tower. We're live from Tokenization Tower. Markets and weather live from New York and from Miami with Rob. As mentioned, Paxos Labs co-founder joins the show. Project 11 CEO also joins the show. And then Varus Capital's head of venture, who put out one of the most viral crypto VC tweets, is also joining the show.
Yeah, pretty insane. I think he got into traditional VC Twitter as well. Excited to talk to Tom. Man, ton going on. Absolute melt up happening.
Yes.
They're criming the charts on Binance, but that is sort of the world that we're leaving behind as we enter this new generation of finance. It's pretty incredible to see. Hyperliquid and this Colossus piece is continuing to make the rounds, and overall, things don't seem to be stopping anytime soon.
No, they don't. They really don't. I mean, we will see, right? Like Michael Saylor's stretching hard right now. That is what's happening on his product.
What do you mean?
STRC.
Stretching hard.
He is hitting the ATM and using this stretch product to issue a ton of more debt and to buy a lot of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I think they did almost...
They did $1 billion.
Yeah, 700 million or $1 billion.
$1 billion,
on the stretch
yeah.
product. Yeah.
Biggest buy in a long time. Tom Lee also bought a very substantial amount, the two largest purchases from the two largest treasury companies that we've seen in months.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, huge. And it just seems like these guys are going back and forth trying to one up each other. Who can build the better Ponzi is what people are saying on Twitter about this.
Oh boy. Look, if they don't start contributing to these protocols, building some real productive value, then sure, call them a Ponzi. They're just honeypots of capital. I think there's two very clear paths. I think Tom Lee is already starting to stake and contribute to the security of the validator network in Ethereum. Very soon, I could understand a strategy, a vault strategy, or a DeFi allocation strategy, where BitMine starts to look a lot more like an Ethereum native investment company, starts to generate some returns, almost like the Ethereum Berkshire Hathaway, if you will.
Yeah.
That's on the Tom Lee BitMine side. On the Bitcoin strategy side, we know what it is, and you have Alex Pruden. We have Alex Pruden in the Tokenization Tower today. We know that quantum is the biggest threat facing Bitcoin right now. Maybe there's some pushback there, but I don't think so. I think people would most likely agree that quantum is the biggest threat facing Bitcoin. If Saylor can rally the troops and put together a squad that can help push through either a Bitcoin soft fork, some sort of security best practices, or quantum resistance in the Bitcoin algorithm and actually get some contributions through, that is where I think we could see Michael Saylor actually making some contributions, bettering the protocol itself, and not just being a Ponzi. So I'd love to see Saylor contribute in this way. I think this would pull them out of Ponzi territory, put them into the productive capital territory, and ultimately make some very meaningful contributions on both the Bitcoin front for Michael Saylor and the Ethereum front for Tom Lee. Fact of the matter is, coins are going up. And that's what matters right now. So we will see how these things progress. Today's topics are powered by Trezor. Use code ROLLUP10 to get 10% off your Trezor hardware device. I saw there was a potential exploit on CowSwap. And so you guys want to make sure that you're protecting yourselves both on the contract side, revoke any approvals that you guys have. Better to be safe than sorry. And then also on the hardware side, make sure that you are protecting yourself. Use hardware wallets. And specifically use the code ROLLUP10 to get yourself a new Trezor. So that is what we're going to be talking about on the show. We've got Paxos Labs co-founder. They just made a big announcement. They also unveiled some new branding. We've got Project 11 CEO talking about quantum, how Bitcoin should face quantum, especially in the light of the new announcements and optimizations from Google and Justin Drake. And then obviously Varus Capital, Tom Dunleavy is going to join the show, and we are going to get through this viral post that he had and everything happening in the VC ecosystem. Seems like there's a lot of back and forth. Guys, let's keep going.
I'm back.
Shout out to Frax, the Genius compatible stablecoin. Absolutely incredible. Frax is doing incredible things in the stablecoin world. This is the cornerstone and the pin that underpins the entire tokenization thesis. Andy knows, I know, all of us know. It starts with stable coins.
Yes, sir.
Then we get tokenized treasuries. Then we get tokenized equities. We work our way down the risk curve. We tokenize all the way through. All of these
There we go.
become on-chain. They go into your favorite protocols, and then we really begin to re-rate the valuations of on-chain applications. This is what I'm
Guys, it's
excited
80
about.
degrees in the tokenization tower.
That's not trench coat weather.
No, it was short sleeve weather this morning here. Nice Chelsea boots, walk on. Gonna go meet one of those institutional folks later today. So I'm gonna wear this outfit with my nice tucked in shirt and all. Went to the Solana Summit yesterday in a beautiful building in Brooklyn and had this 360 view of Manhattan and of Queens, if you will, and just kind of looked over. It's pretty epic. Only saw two crazies walking to the office today, so that was a good sign. Shout out to Relay powering our weather. Let's give them some love. Relay.link, bringing in the best cross-chain swaps in the market. Let's get off the weather. Let's get to the markets. People want to hear about what's going on in the markets, what we think is happening. People are trying to buy Hyperliquid under 40. I don't know if you're going to get it, ladies and gentlemen. Slight rebound in the equities market. Looking like the S&P is going to go to all-time highs. I think so. Oil's down. Oil's topped. You heard it here first. Oil's done.
Whoa.
Sure, the inflation concerns could be kept alive. I think oil's done, Rob. The top is in for oil. You heard it here, guys. I think it's pretty firmly accurate that the top is in here. Kevin Warsh just also came out, Rob.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
We've come to find out that he is an early investor in Polymarket, in Lighter. He was in Optimism, Solana.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's a crypto legend, Fed share. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean,
pretty
you gotta
insane.
be excited about that.
We're going to see how it plays out. This guy was hawkish compared to the other consideration that Trump was making.
Yeah.
However, now that it comes time for him to unveil some of his personal holdings, people are realizing that he's got a soft spot for crypto. Even
Yes.
if it means he's hawkish in the rate environment, we could see some very friendly regulation because remember, the Fed's got a dual mandate, but they are also in charge of some regulatory landscapes when it comes to how these markets are regulated. And so, yes, we might see some slower pace of rate cuts, but ultimately I think that's where things are trending. We can check Polymarket to confirm. But then also, when it comes to how prediction markets, how some of these things are integrated into the global financial ecosystem, I think we could see a soft spot for crypto. People are really excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, I think what's cool about it, though, is like, yes, definitely soft spot for crypto, definitely interested in it. But I saw a tweet that was like, Kevin Warsh knows you need to hold risk to get paid. And that is the most bullish thing about this Fed share, is that he knows you need to hold risk, get paid. And this is the same guy we might have on Thursday, who's been absolutely deep into PER, the hyperliquid DAT from David Shamus that we had on the show. I remember when David Shamus left, I was with Atan. We were talking about maybe sending that thing to $25. He said he was going to be absolutely just stoked if that thing hit 25. It's at 650 today. It's on. So
There we go.
$9, Solana 85, ETH pushing hard, getting calls about that now. Bitcoin 75, near under that 1.4. I'm putting my Zama hat on today, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
This thing is trading over 35% up today. Shout out to Zama. Privacy, encrypted transactions, and tokens, all on Ethereum mainnet. Also, number go up technology today. Shout out to Zama. Shout out to our digital assets market prices today, ladies and gentlemen.
I got one more thing that I want to add to the digital asset market prices presented by Zama. This, I don't believe is on our runner show, but there was about, whenever this conflict arose, maybe about a month or 2 months ago, our resident macro analyst, Arthur Hayes, put out a piece about how the Iran war could potentially lead to more money printer go burr.
Okay.
Yesterday, last night, Trump announced a 1.5 trillion, I believe that's the number. You might want to fact check me on that, but I believe it's a $1.5 trillion military package. This just comes directly from the money printer. In that piece that Arthur put out 2 months ago or so, whenever this conflict initially started, he said the longer this goes on, the more likely that the money printer goes burr. People are all, we want this conflict to end. And look, no one's a fan of people dying. We want the dying of people to stop, right? But economically, when these two countries are in tension with one another, we've already gotten over the initial oil go up, markets go down. The market has disassociated from this reality. And I think the Citrini research piece really put this in perspective and laid out a thesis for why oil can continue to go up, but markets can also continue to go up. These two things are not mutually exclusive. In addition to oil and markets going up, we could see money printer go burr as a result of Trump pushing through some military aid packages. And Arthur was on the money 2 months prior. The guy gets a lot of slack for being a boomer in this market. People think he gets everything wrong, but I continue to think he's one of the most prolific macro analysts out there today.
Ladies and gentlemen, our armchair resident macro expert, Robbie.
Everything I know, I get from Arthur.
Hyperliquid, baby. Let's go. All right, let's move on to some of the news. Before we do, let me tell you about our premier AI partner, Near.ai, the blockchain for AI. Native applications, the agentic future, the execution layer for AI on chain. If anyone's going to bring AI on chain, it's going to be Near, it's going to be Ilya, it's going to be the co-author of the Transformer paper. Let's get into the news today, guys. Builder advice from Kane. Build for the agent 6 months from now, not the agent today. Kane sat down with Robert Sagerson from the Fogo team to talk about how the old world doesn't exist anymore and what it takes to build for the new one. Let's play this video and hear what Kane has to say.
Back to like build for the agent 6 months from now, right? Not for today. The agents are still a bit too dumb to work all this out in real time and balance the user trade-offs. Like the smartest agents can do it, but it's very expensive. And so it becomes prohibitively expensive to have Opus like deciding, your $20 ETH transaction, whether it should be private or not, right? Because it's going to cost you $5 for Opus to like reason about that. But Haiku, it costs 2 cents, but it's just like a little bit too dumb, right? And so we're like almost not quite there. And so, in, let's call it 2 generations of models, Haiku's as smart as Opus, and it costs 2 cents, and it can reason about it. And so the goal then is to get out of the way of the agent, assume the agent's smart, assume it can figure it out, and give it access to all of these things, all of these tools. give it a harness where it can have persistent information about the user. So it learns the difference between you and I, what you like, what I like, what the differences are. Some things we do it the same way, some things we do differently for different reasons at different times, right? So you have to give the agent the ability to learn about the user so that it can actually do the thing that the user wants. Give it access to all the tools. And you need to be flexible enough that no matter which agent it is that is the best trade-off of cost, et cetera, that you're routing to that agent in real time. And the system understands the trade-off space of the different agents. So that's like directionally what I think you need to build to solve this problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
I think, as we think about what the next couple of generations of models could look like, there's already open source models today that are, I mean, just incredibly intelligent and can make incredibly informed decisions with very little cost. And this is why in Ironclaw, you see this mass migration. Originally, everyone was using Claude. I think you were also using Claude originally for Ironclaw. But then, you have Kimi K2, and that is starting to get more and more market share from more of these agents. I'm also curious how open source is going to play into this, whether that is going to be a leader when it comes to these models. But ultimately, I think Kane is right. I think building for the smart there's going to be the frontier of intelligence and affordability. And I think that's what Kane is saying here. We should build for that frontier. Don't limit what you think the agent can do, because by the time you ship product, the next model is going to be able to do it, and it's going to be able to do it at very affordably. So what you currently think is prohibitive cost is no longer going to be prohibitive.
yeah, I mean, I've experienced this firsthand, right? Where like you're switching your Opus to Claude Sonnet in OpenClaw, and you're like firsthand seeing the difference in the just reasoning and like the removal of like the lack of back and forth that's required on Opus 4.6 versus Sonnet 4.5, completely different models. And when you go to the API usage, the amount of money you spend on Opus versus the amount that you spend on Sonnet is insane. Like the difference is absolutely insane. And so, yeah, I mean, look, I'm personally just excited for this. Like, I'm excited to get to a place where the amount of capital that you're spending to get an Opus 4.6 like response today is that of spending like a Sonnet 4.5 model. So
these things will get better and they will get more affordable as these models continue to come out. And I think that's the takeaway here. Also, if I'm a builder, I'm not building for humans anymore. I think that's a huge takeaway, and we've continued to talk about it. Build in real life experiences, build hardware. These things are built for humans. But when it comes to software, it's increasingly visible that the main modality in which we're going to be transacting, and not just transacting, but navigating the internet, is going to be via agents. And so if you're building a software business, you should build with agents in mind, because those are the target customers going forward.
100%. All right, guys, let's move on from Kane. Shout out to Kane. The next UX layer will not be humans clicking. It'll be agents executing flows and apps.
It's good to see Infinex believing in this, taking part in this, building with it in mind.
Trump White House admin just said Bitcoin and crypto market structure will head to the Senate vote in the next few weeks. We are almost there. Very bullish for clarity. This is from Patrick Witt, saying that the next few weeks is what the committee advancement timeline is looking like. Key progress being made. Mix of optimism and regulatory clarity here. Also pessimism in terms of, we've heard this a lot. Let's hear what Patrick has to say here at the NYSE with CoinDesk.
Market structure passed before that. Optimistic, and I'm mindful of the fact that it feels like a lot of times I get asked that question, and it's like we're
Yeah.
almost there. We're almost there. It can be a little bit discouraging, but again, cautiously optimistic. We've made a ton of progress over the past couple months. This is a complicated piece of legislation, and so it's not surprising that it's going to take a long time to close out the issues. We obviously had 2 committees of jurisdiction. We advanced the bill out of the Ag Committee, and now we're just closing out the remaining issues on the banking side. So we're hopeful that we're going to be able to get a markup this month, in the next few weeks here. So more work to be done. When we finish here, I'll go right back to it. But I'm very hopeful that we're going to be able to advance the bill to the floor here.
Beautiful. I mean, I was thinking and hearing that it was going to be maybe more like this week. Like I was expecting to get this markup. The way that Cynthia Lummis was tweeting was suggesting that it may be this week. But again, we've heard this timeline so many times now. I mean, how many times have we heard this week timeline? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't have much to add here. We get another one of these videos seemingly every couple of days.
Yeah, it's honestly just like annoying at this point.
It's like either pass it or don't, you know,
like,
but
just
don't say that it's coming. These politicians are like, they're like the old announcement of an announcement.
Oh, I know.
The old L1 founder. Yes, we have something coming, something big week this week.
It's coming. Yeah, okay. All right, let's move on.
Patrick Witt, ex-player, ex-quarterback for the Saints, one of the best quarterbacks of Yale University of all time. What do we have here?
The question isn't whether quantum computing will impact Bitcoin. It's whether today's systems are built to adapt when it does. We're going to have Alex Pruden on today. Yes. I'm actually going to add him. I'm going to ask him about the Stretch product for sure. CZ notes that crypto will evolve with quantum computing. If we scroll down, I think there's a clip here that suggests that there's going to be upgrading of network security, a network-wide fork. Let's hear what CZ has to say here on TVPN.
How are you thinking about the risk of quantum computing
really
to the cryptocurrency ecosystem broadly?
I think there is some risk, but I think overall, though, any technology improvement is always going to be good. More computing power is good for crypto. Mm-hmm. So quantum may break the existing encryption mechanisms, but with quantum computing, there's probably there will be new encryption algorithms. Well, there are already quantum-proof encryption algorithms that quantum computers do not have an advantage to crack. So we just need to upgrade the protocol to use those encryption mechanisms. Also, more computing power with quantum, there's probably newer encryption mechanisms we have not even thought about that we can use quantum to encrypt, and decryption is always going to be much harder.
How are you thinking about the risk of quantum computing?
Yeah, are they really going to upgrade Bitcoin? Like, are they really like Saylor said the same thing, right? And I actually saw this tweet that was like Saylor's appearance on the Bankless podcast did more for Saylor and Bitcoin than any previous podcast, like a Bitcoin Maxi podcast, because, and this person I think was like Eric Wall or Udi, and they called them like the low IQ concern takes from the ETH side, and just kind of showing that there's like these concerns. And I don't know, it's kind of like the same thing here where it's like these concerns are real. Of course, Saylor's going to tell you that they're going to upgrade. Do I believe him? Do I believe that Saylor has any power over the ability for Bitcoin to upgrade? I don't.
Really? Saylor,
do you think
Saylor's one of the largest owners of Bitcoin? Who would have more power than him in the Bitcoin protocol?
I don't think Saylor could single-handedly influence Bitcoin's protocol developers to do anything.
I think people can be bought with money. And I think Saylor has a lot of money and a lot of Bitcoin, and therefore a lot of power in the Bitcoin protocol. And I think he can effectively grant researchers a significant amount of Bitcoin. And I think those researchers would then, if they're very Bitcoin aligned, look, the researchers want to upgrade. They don't want Bitcoin to fail. They don't want Bitcoin to fail. The ossifiers are the ones that are very conservative. These are the large institutions. If anyone's going to be strong ossification, pro-ossification for Bitcoin, it's going to be Saylor. If Saylor's saying, hey, we need to upgrade this so that Bitcoin doesn't fail, then he takes that right there. He can go to the researchers. He can say, look, I have the firepower. I have the clout in this Bitcoin protocol, and we can team up with the researchers to push this through.
Yeah.
I think the quantum problem for Bitcoin is not an engineering or a research problem anymore. It's a political one. And I think there needs to be some alignment within this political regime of Bitcoin right now. We thought through this when it came to OPCat, right? We did an entire Bitcoin series about what that was going to look like, and we were thinking through, what the Taproot wizards and some of these cabals, right? It's very like faction related, very tribal within the Bitcoin ecosystem. None of these parties want Bitcoin to fail. I think if there's some rough consensus that can be reached, and there's an upgrade path that is very safe, and there's a lot of development resources put behind that research path to ensure its safety, I do think that we will get an upgrade. Maybe that's aspirational, but no one wants Bitcoin to fail. That would be terrible.
Yeah. Look, I don't know that the Bitcoin devs are going to just bow down to Mr. Saylor because he's trying to keep his Ponzi alive.
I mean, the Bitcoin devs want to keep their Ponzi alive too.
And so do the miners, don't they? All right, guys, we've got Bhau, Kotecha coming up from Paxos Labs. They just announced a $12 million raise in an Amplify product. So we're going to just break this and just talk about what's going on with Bhau, with Paxos Labs, a company that spun out from Paxos in 2025, builds infrastructure for on-chain finance, stablecoins like USDG Zero, custom stablecoins, DeFi yield products, and more. He's based in New York as well. I think he just left, actually. So without further ado, I think it's time to bring Bhau up.
Let's bring him up.
Let's congratulate them on the raise and give him some love. Let's give Bhau some love. Congratulations on the $12 million raise. Welcome to the show, man. It's good to have you back.
Robbie, it's great to see you guys. Thanks for having me. And first of all, I'm sorry I'm not in New York to see your new studio. I just happened to be traveling this week, but I will be back, and we got to hang in that fresh new studio you guys have got going up there.
Yes, sir. Busy week for you, man. Busy week.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks again for having me on. But as you mentioned, we announced the launch of our Amplify product suite, which is really focused around building financial utility around digital assets. I'll talk about that more in a second. But the second part of the announcement, obviously, was the strategic fundraise led by Blockchain Capital. Obviously, this isn't a traditional venture round. We've been kind of incubated within Paxos and kind of been thinking and developing this product for a while. And so we did want to bring on some strategic investors that would help us grow in the ecosystem. But on Amplify, I think the origin story is a little bit helpful here potentially, right? I spent 3.5 years at Paxos across the business looking at things like stablecoin issuance, white label stablecoins, right? So we did the Binance stablecoin, PayPal stablecoin back in the day, now issue USDG on the behalf of the global dollar network, which includes players like Robinhood, Kraken, OKX, and others. And then, the other side of the business was enabling crypto trading, so access to trade Bitcoin, ETH in embedded platforms, right? And so one of the things we spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about was, hey, this whole kind of like call it enterprise crypto 1.0 was all about enabling access, right? I remember in 2020 when PayPal first enabled crypto trading via Paxos, it kind of triggered this huge bull run where it was like, hey, like now everyone's going to be able to access Bitcoin and ETH and all these crypto assets. Amazing. But, for guys like yourself that have been in crypto for a while, if I told you, hey, 5 years from now, every major institution will offer access to crypto assets, from JP Morgan to Interactive Brokers to everyone, but all you can do is buy and hold. I think we would look at that and be like, that's a failure. That's not the mission of kind of crypto and decentralized finance and what we believe can happen with digital assets. And so what we were looking at Paxos was, hey, this is great. A lot of people are starting this first step on their journey. Who's going to enable them to take the next step? How do we actually enable financial services and products on top of this base layer of access and digital assets? And that's what we're trying to do out of Paxos Labs with our Amplify product, right? Start with enable yield, start with enabling you to borrow against your assets, enable platforms to put their branding on their assets, right? Kind of that next set of capabilities. And we have a lot more planned, which we're excited to share in the coming months and years. But that's kind of the origin and what we're working on. And we're super stoked.
Incredible. And so, what I saw the announcement and I thought you guys framed it incredibly well, because the question of what's next, I think, is what a lot of people are starting to ask themselves. And that's the one we should be asking. Ultimately, we have this tokenization thesis. It starts with stable coins, and then it quickly goes down the risk curve until everything is tokenized. Treasuries, tokenized equities, all of these things, real estate, credit products, all of these things ultimately come on chain. The next question is, hey, what now? Once those things are on chain, our belief is that they end up in these same DeFi primitives, these protocols that we kind of know and love. They've been battle tested and resilient over the last few years. Now they're ready for non-crypto native assets, and that's the tokenization wave that's coming. And so help us understand this Amplify product. Is it essentially, kind of an enablation layer? You're enabling all of these different, Paxos stable coins to get yield, to be used in DeFi. How might this look? How can customers start to get involved with what this could mean for their assets?
Yeah, totally. And so right now, the primary customer that we work with is someone that's already started with crypto, right? They're offering their end users to maybe buy and hold stable coins, buy and hold Bitcoin, ETH. Now, the thing that we immediately want to enable, help these platforms enable is, well, yeah, how do you earn yield on these stable coins, right? How do you deploy them onto on-chain protocols in a safe way? And I think the really specific thing for us here is, yes, we're abstracting away the need for maybe a non-crypto native enterprise to integrate smart contracts and all that stuff, but we're also helping them kind of integrate this in a way that they understand from a risk and compliance standpoint, right? We can go into these rooms, especially taking our decade of experience from Paxos, and really understand how these enterprises look at kind of risk, compliance, legal, all of those things, and help them structure an offering around that, right? I think that is the piece where I think we're really trying to bring together like this dream of decentralized finance and permissionless protocols and all the amazing things that people have built over the last 5-10 years in the space, but bringing it in a package that makes sense to enterprises, right? How do they enter this in a safe way? How do they enter this in a way that they understand? So we're starting with yield on stablecoins, right? Helping people deploy into on-chain protocols, but not just Paxos stablecoins, right? And this is part of also the reason that we made sure this was a different entity. Look, our customers want to enable all types of stablecoin holdings, right? Some people hold USDC, some people have USDG, PayPal stablecoin. It's all about serving the customer at the end of the day, and we're going to be neutral infrastructure from that perspective. And look, if it's USDC you want to work with, we're happy to help support you there. That's kind of our position as a neutral infrastructure provider. I think the next step here is for anyone that's offering crypto trading, right? It's like, how do you actually use those assets to go borrow against them, right? And similar thing where it's like, hey, I hold Bitcoin. How do I actually go borrow against them? And how do I do it in a way? How do we create guardrails here that make it feel much safer, right? If you've borrowed on chain, the like waking up in the middle of the night and being like, oh my God, what's the price of my collateral? Right? How do we put in the guardrails so that you don't have kind of the average consumer kind of sweating all these details? And so this is kind of the stuff we're doing with our partners to say, how can we enable these financial services for your users in a much safer, compliant, risk mitigated way?
Yeah. And Bo, when it comes to actually on more of the raise and the finance side, because I know that we're going to get, deeper into the tokenization and kind of product side here, just something that I think that the audience will want to understand is two things. First, what do you kind of plan to do with the 12 million? What is that going to enable you guys to be able to do that you previously weren't either able to or were looking to expand upon? And then, why blockchain capital? What did they bring to the table that other investors, weren't exactly privy to?
Totally. So I think on the first round of where we're gonna use the raise for, obviously one is on the go to market side, right? How do we continue to kind of help customers understand what comes next, help them answer this question and have the right folks that can guide them there. I tell people when we talk to customers, we probably spend 10% of the time talking about our product itself. It's like 90% of the time is helping them understand this journey that they should be thinking about. And it's a lot of kind of like at the education phase, right? And then it's about like, hey, here's how we can help you take this to go on this journey. But I think the second area that we're planning to invest here is additional R&D, right? Really understanding like the existing protocols that exist enable certain use cases and we can put guardrails around them. Are there primitives that we need to build ourselves that have some of the guardrails built in, right? Whether that's privacy, whether that's certain types of risk things, whether that's certain types of off-chain collateral being enabled, right? That's where we're really spending a lot of time on the R&D side, right? Existing protocols, we can build around them. Are there net new things we need to build all the way down to the primitive layer to actually enable our enterprise customers to have the experience that they want?
Yeah.
On the blockchain capital side, so they were actually an early investor in Paxos, so about a decade ago, right? And so one of the things I think that resonated with us and BCAP immediately when we spoke about what we were thinking here is they immediately got it. I really feel like you kind of have to have been thinking about crypto and stablecoins for a long enough period of time to have arrived at this question as well, right? And so because BCAP has been involved with Paxos for so long, they've also been thinking about these questions and have been along for the journey. And so I think we aligned so clearly on the vision, and for them it was as obvious as it was for us, and so they became great partners. And obviously I almost think of BCAP and Paxos as kind of similar parallels, right? Of investors and an infrastructure fund that's been around for a decade in a space that's very young, right? So I think there was a natural fit there, and obviously we love the team at BCAP and have worked closely with them in the past and are excited to continue to do so.
Yeah. Bhau, you've got quite the background in fintech because you spent some time at Square, also I believe 4 years there, and then also at Cash App for a year before joining Paxos and kind of continuing on a more focused journey within stablecoins. I'm curious, as you're thinking about some of the go-to-market plans for Amplify and generally how you've seen the adoption of new fintech, new technologies within this space, at Square, how does that inform your perspective now and where you see stablecoins going and how Paxos Labs fits in?
Yeah, totally. And I think, maybe that's helpful context as well, as my journey to Paxos was very much informed by insights that I had in my fintech career, right? While I was working at Square and Cash App, it became increasingly clear, like, hey, again, that's kind of in my mind, like fintech 1.0, like call it 2010 to 2020. They were enabling a better user experience. People were going mobile first. It was great. There was a lot of innovation that was happening there. But if you actually sat inside those organizations, you saw the pain that the enterprise was internalizing on behalf of the user for building on traditional rails, right? The payment operations teams we had, all the manual processes we had to do to make the user experience better. After looking at that for almost 6 years, I was like, this kind of front end innovation is amazing, but there's got to be an upgrade coming to the back end, right? There's no way that this is going to continue this way. But the key thing there was I noticed on the Square and Cash App side how hard it is to do end consumer acquisition, right? Or end merchant acquisition. And the thesis that started to form for me was there's going to be a back end upgrade, but it's actually probably going to be invisible to consumers, right? And that was very much the perspective that Paxos had, is like, how do we enable the Cash Apps of the world to upgrade their backend? How do we enable the Venmos of the world to upgrade their backend? The consumer experience doesn't change. Maybe it's better, it's cheaper, faster, maybe, right? But really the problem you're solving for these fintechs is for the enterprise itself, right? Because they are taking the pain of building on legacy rails and we're helping them upgrade, right? And so I think that's what brought me to Paxos, right? It was very much like that vision of there's a back end upgrade coming. Someone needs to do it in the right way, in a regulated way, an enterprise grade way. And it's likely going to be sold directly into the existing financial institutions. And so that was a lot, the journey, all the dots connect together looking backwards, but it was very much kind of like, hey, this is where the world's going. And it's what brought me to Paxos and led me to launch Paxos Labs.
And how much of the stable coin trajectory now would you project is going into this direction of, hey, we're going to upgrade FinTech 1.0, Paxos and Paxos Labs? You guys are already doing great work with PayPal, like you had talked about earlier. You mentioned Cash App as another one of those FinTech 1.0s that can get their backend upgraded. And then we've also sort of got this concept of remittances, payments, kind of these like, user to user stable coin use cases. Where do you think this shakes out? How, where's the market really valuing stable coins?
Yeah. So, maybe I'll give like a slightly hot take here where I actually think the payments use case for stablecoins is kind of boring. Like, sure, it's faster, it's cheaper, great, let's do it. I think there's a couple of things people fail to internalize when they look at maybe cheaper payments or faster payments. When you send cross-border money, do cross-border money movements or payments in general, what people like to compare is today's all-in cost of like the legacy rails versus like, hey, look, I can send $1 on Solana for a penny or a quarter of a penny. But people don't realize where the costs and payments actually come from, right? It's compliance and fraud and all the things you need to do, screening, like anti-money laundering. That's where the cost adds up. And so I think we're yet to really see the like, what is the true apples to apples comparison? I still think it'll be cheaper. I think it'll be great. It'll be faster. But I do think the more interesting thing around stable coins and digital assets is, well, what are the financial services that people previously couldn't access that they now can? Payments is a financial service, right? And maybe some people are left out of that, and we should expand that and make it better. But I think about things like credit markets, right? Who can't actually get access to credit today because of the structural limitations of who gets in and who's allowed out, who's not allowed in, right? And so stuff like that is really interesting. Another example I'll give is like, hey, there's the entire markets around commodities trading and commodities leasing, right? Those are only available to institutions, right? Well, why? Like, right? Like how, like starting to think about these things around, there's a whole category of financial services that people just cannot access. And I'm not saying like, consumer in Africa. I'm saying even the most sophisticated US investors can't access, right? And so that's where it's really interesting to me. I think stablecoins for payments, it's gonna be great. It'll be an upgrade, exciting, great. But the real like mind-bending stuff will happen when it's like people are getting things that they never could actually access before versus something that's maybe a little bit faster or cheaper.
Yeah, but isn't the business model of payments where there's a lot of opportunity on the margin, right? Compared to kind of like savings or compared to like storing value, like isn't that the big allure for kind of disrupting some of these credit card companies, disrupting some of these traditional payment networks? Like, isn't there just a lot of profit on the margin being optimized by these payment networks that, theoretically stable coins and, blockchain based payments would kind of allow to disrupt? Like that's kind of where the excitement is.
It is, right? There's definitely a huge opportunity there. The thing I'll say is, and again, I don't want me to undersell the opportunity in payments. There's an opportunity there. There's margin improvement to be had. But I think the reason payments is often top of mind for people is because it's the most part of their day-to-day lives today. It's the most like obvious thing to look at. And sure, payments, huge market, money movement, there's a lot of value to be captured there, but I think people fail to realize like, hey, like how big are some of the other markets, right? There's hundreds of trillions of dollars of assets across global credit markets, across commodities markets, across real estate. There's all this other stuff that I think people just haven't quite wrap their heads around the potential there. Because again, like payments is the existing business model, so it's very easy to look at it and be like, okay, we can improve that, right? I think there is a kind of a net new set of asset classes that are going to come on chain, and then there's going to be utility that's built around them, right? You might be doing payments on assets that you could never do payments on before, right? So like, what does that look like, right? And so, I don't mean to undersell the opportunity in payments, right? There's definitely something there. I spent half my career in payments. There's a lot of areas to improve, but it's more of like the reason I kind of try to like tell this story is I don't think enough people are thinking about like what else is there, right, for stable coins and digital assets, right? It doesn't stop at payments. I think there's a long road to go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of thinking ahead into this future world where we will have a lot of tokenized assets on chain, whether they be kind of on the equity side, on the T-bill side, on the stablecoin side, really just kind of like putting ourselves a couple years in advance here. We're going to be over $1 trillion in total stablecoins, likely continue to be led by Tether and by Circle. We're going to have a lot more equities trading on chain led by Hyperliquid, other perps dexes, and even spot markets as well. It's just like this entire world is going to look a lot different on chain specifically than what we're used to. It's going to it's going to rival non-crypto asset trading and speculation and activity on chain in a tokenized form will likely rival that of traditional crypto asset activity on chain, on exchanges, just at large. It's kind of a popular opinion now, you could say. In that world, in that future world, where is Amplify? What is the Paxos Labs kind of point in that world? What space do you aim to kind of take up and provide for the market? Let's look 18 to 36 months out. What's the vision here?
Totally. So I think the vision that you laid out here, right? Like, okay, we're at trillions of dollars of stable coins and trillions of dollars on DeFi protocols. Amazing. I think the biggest change that is going to take place over the next 18 to 24 to 36 months is where that capital is coming in from. Today and to date, a large percentage of what you see in the stablecoin volume and trading volume and kind of the on-chain activity are really still the early adopters.
Yeah.
The people that like the people that we talk to that are like comfortable getting a MetaMask wallet, getting a Phantom wallet, going and doing some of these things, right? When you think about that pool of people as a percentage of kind of the global capital market, right? It is a very small percentage. And when we think about our Amplify product, it's like, well, how do we make it easier for the 50 million users that use, Venmo or Cash App, or, the tens of millions of users on Nubank, or even some more of the kind of enterprise platforms, right, where they're actually serving businesses on the other side? How do we help them tap into this, right? Because I think the size of the market there is much, much larger. I'll give you an example, right? If you look at some of the largest US-based brokerages, right, kind of like maybe the Vanguards and the E-Trades and the Schwabs of the world, they're sitting on like $100 billion of capital at any given time, more, right? Like if you're looking just at cash, you're talking about tens to maybe $100 billion. If you're looking at equities, it's trillions, right? And so now it's like, well, how do we make it easier for those platforms to start to connect into these markets, right? Because if one of these brokerage platform said, Gary, I have $100 billion of cash on platform, I'm going to flip that to stablecoin. That's a 50% growth in the stablecoin market cap overnight, right? And again, obviously it wouldn't happen in a one fell swoop like that, but it is like conceptualizing the opportunity where it's like, it's actually going to come from these existing platforms that have distribution. And so for a lot of what we're talking about with Amplify is how do we enable those platforms, right? To connect into stablecoins, on-chain markets, protocols, in a way that meets their kind of enterprise requirements, right? So really, we're kind of combining two or three things here with Paxos Labs and Amplify is deep experience in stablecoins and crypto and DeFi, right? With deep experience in building for enterprises and regulated institutions, right? And then bringing kind of all of that together in a single package that enables them to go, right? And so I think those things together, I think, takes us to 10x easily over the next couple of years.
And what is the plan for distribution? Is it, try to get consumers directly onto an Amplify app? Are you guys going to be looking at centralized exchanges, other neobanks to distribute these earned products?
Yeah.
How are you thinking about this?
Yeah, so I think from this perspective, right, I think we're very similar to Paxos in that we are a neutral enterprise infrastructure provider, right? We do not compete with our end customer or with our customers for end users. We are enablers for their platform, right? And so we aren't necessarily building a direct to consumer product. This is very much meant to be distributed directly via enterprises, institutions, and platforms. And again, I think this is a really important part of our strategy, right? And this is a question that people probably have asked on the Paxos side too, is like, hey, you've been around for so long, why not build direct to consumer products, right?
Yeah.
And when you are an enterprise selecting an infrastructure partner, it is very unsettling to say to feel like, hey, these guys might actually turn around and just take my customers or compete for my end users, right? And so for us to go to our partners and say, this is our business. Our business is to enable your business, right? And we are successful when you are successful, and there is no competing kind of motive here to say, hey, we're going to kind of Trojan horse you here and come in and take all your users, right? And so I think it's a very important way of how we position ourselves as this kind of neutral infrastructure provider, and our customer success is our success.
And who are some of the target segments? Are you guys looking more at kind of more of the crypto native, like, the centralized exchanges with some significant distribution, or kind of going more in the institutional front? Everyone seems to have an institutional strategy now. What are you guys mainly targeting?
Yeah. So look, I think for any company in this space, you have to balance two things, right? Who's ready now and who's going to need a couple years of education to get there, right? And
Yeah.
so when we think about how we spend our time in the market, it is about like finding the customers that are ready to go now, whether that's wallets, exchanges, maybe crypto native neobanks, right? Who's ready to integrate this today? And let's build together as partners and help develop this infrastructure. And the other side of our efforts are spending a lot of time with institutions, enterprises, and as I mentioned at the top, we're still at the education cycle, right? Now everyone knows what a stablecoin is. Everyone knows what crypto trading is. Great. People are taking steps to integrate that. We're kind of looking ahead, looking out 2 to 3 years for these institutions and saying, here's what you should be thinking about coming next, right? And so when I think about where we're spending our time in market, it's kind of the find the right partners that are ready to go today and build this customer base and build kind of resiliency of our infrastructure while also spending time with institutions that hey, they might take 2 3 years to actually be ready, but we're spending that time being partners, educating, helping them get to that point. And one point I'll make there, I think this has kind of been like a unique part of the Paxos DNA as well as now the Paxos Labs DNA is I think crypto as an industry has had a tendency to be a little short-sighted, right? Very much looking for quick wins, very much looking for like kind of what's the exciting thing to talk about now. I think time and time again, it's been in our DNA to say, hey, these things take time and you need to operate on kind of a multi-decade horizon, and you can't be operating on the I need to like have a big banger of a Twitter post every quarter of like this thing, right? Like if you operate that way, you're gonna like incentivize your organization in the wrong way and you're not going to be set up for long-term success, right?
Yeah. I mean, Bhau, this RWA, stablecoin, tokenization, regulatory efforts, all of these fronts combined. I was telling Rob this on yesterday's show. It's just like, it's not exactly that exciting. Like, it's a lot of like bringing TradFi on chain. It's a lot of like doing things the right way. It's like, kind of like covering small gaps and finding a little bit of inefficiencies in the market here. But like what is exciting is that kind of future vision that I was laying out in a previous question, which is, when we have trillions of dollars of all of these non-crypto assets on chain, the mental model that we're using to value DeFi protocols, blockchains, infrastructure providers, it goes from, oh, we're just kind of building a small niche environment here for some hardcore on-chain crypto users to like, oh, no, we are literally building an alternative on-chain 24/7 financial system that has a lot of advantages and benefits to the existing. And like that future world, you can start to think a lot about different markups and different assets. You can speculate across the board, but like that is like the world where we're getting to. And a lot of people are kind of disillusioned right now by this intermediate, what feels like a necessary step to get there. I get a lot of pushback about like, wow, man, you're really excited about taking a centralized asset and putting it on a blockchain. Like, is that really like the end game here? And so it kind of feels like there's like this intermediate, somewhat, disillusionment happening with how the space is progressing. But I think as long as you keep your kind of mind on that end state to where we're going, it should appease both builders and speculators if you can really kind of wrap your head around what we're doing here. %
And look, I think some of the things that attracted a lot of people to this space is some of the ideals and the vision of like, bringing these financial services to everyone and inclusion and access. And I still very much believe in that vision and future. I do think it's now the right time for us to sprinkle in like a little bit of pragmatism of like, how do you get there? How do you actually take the steps to get there, right? We can't just be idealist and sit there and kind of like think about like, oh, how great would it be? You really have to kind of sprinkle in this like plan of like, hey, if we execute on this over the course of the next 5, 10, 15 years, that's how we get towards this vision. And candidly, I think that's been a little bit, we've been a little light on that in the industry over the last 5, 10 years. And I think it's, again, to some people, it might feel boring, but to me, it's like, hey, this is the right sense of kind of like balancing idealism and pragmatism and saying like, how do we actually get towards this world? And sometimes you have to do some of the boring steps that get you there, but I think it'll be worthwhile when we do.
Yeah.
Well, Bo, let's give him some love. Congratulations on the $12 million raise. Thanks for spending some time with us today, man. I know you have a busy week, and I'm sure you have a lot to do. So congratulations on Amplify, on the raise. And the future is now, man. It is happening right now.
Thanks again for having me on. Next time in person in NYC, yeah?
You got
Yes,
it.
sir.
You got it. Congrats, Bo.
All right,
Thanks,
Bo.
guys. See ya.
Atta boy. Man, coming out hot with a $12 million raise, huh, Tom? Come on.
Yeah,
Guys are fired up.
We're going to get
Let's
Tom
go.
on here talking about VC. Meanwhile, $12 million raise. There's some projects that are not hurting out there. The VC capital is out there if you want it.
I got a really good pitch from another small company, and I saw a clip from Xavier from Fractus on the Bell Curve Pod saying how in crypto VC now, you have to have a product with traction that will show potential venture-like returns. And then in this pitch that I got for a very small round, one of the more potentially attractive ones that I've seen the last 6 months, even though I'm pretty skittish when it comes to any sort of angel investing currently. They have traction, they have products going, they have vaults live, and they're doing things. And so it's interesting how, I mean, that's a much smaller iteration than what we're talking about here with Paxos Labs. But yeah, man, I mean, $12 million raise isn't massive, but the appetite is still there. Those guys have been building for so long. And I think they see the vision. I think they see where this is going, and they're going to play a part in it, and they deserve it. And Blockchain Capital is a great investor, obviously an early investor in Paxos, like Bo was saying. So got to be happy for them there.
Yeah, I think they're doing great, man. Paxos Labs obviously is kind of standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
They also had Robot Ventures. Shout out to Tarun, Hart, those guys over there at Robot, and then Uniswap was participating in that round as well. I think they're thinking about this thing the right way. Man, don't let those trolls get to you about these tokenized assets, these centrally controlled assets. Look, just as bad as you, dude. I want Bitcoin to be the world's reserve currency. But like stable coins are the stepping stone to get there.
No, I agree. It's the intermediate required step. Someone in the chat said, what do you guys think of Ondo's new proposal to the SEC? So I think Ondo put out a no action letter, if I recall correctly.
They asked for a no action letter.
The
SEC needs to issue it.
I think they're going to get it, is what I would say. I think the SEC is just going to be writing a lot of no action letters in the coming years. I think I'm thinking pretty positively about every sort of regulatory initiative happening right now. Well, let's get into some of the content here that we didn't get a chance to go over before our next guest.
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing to that, which is what we were talking about yesterday on the show, and how the things that we can do now to prepare for the potential Democrat invasion in 2026 as early as the midterms in November.
This guy said invasion. What's going on over there, man?
Is that not what it? I mean, look, politically, whether you're you align with that or not, we know what that could mean for this industry. And I think it's important as a founder and a builder in this industry to be going and proactively defending against this, potentially offensive, political regime that could be coming in. Obviously, the lawfare that could be coming from World Liberty Finance is just demonstrative. And so I think, Ondo is taking a step in the right direction, going and asking for the no action letter, because that would stand up if there's a new regime. It would take longer to unwind that than if you're just starting from scratch.
Yeah, and so if I'm a protocol looking for one of those, I'm prioritizing action now.
Yeah.
No pun intended. All right, let's move on here into what we didn't cover. I think we have something from YC here. YC will invest in any YC company in stablecoins. The new financial rails will not be over ACH and Wire. Look, I totally agree. Gary Tan put out a post here, $500,000 investment into Totalis, all in stable coins. This is the future of investing, of payments entirely. We have been doing stablecoin payments for our business for like 5-6 years. We've been paying pretty much all of our team on chain for 5-6 years. It is so much easier, so much less of a headache. You don't have to deal with wire transfers, ACHs, waiting times, fees. I mean, this is the most obvious thing in all of crypto right now is stablecoins. It's done wonders for our perception change as well. Like truly, stablecoins have done so much for the positive perception of this industry. I just don't even think that we can appreciate it enough. Like stablecoins took us out of the bottom of the depths of the sentiment hell because it was just a faster, cheaper, better way to move money. Oh, and guess what? You can also expand the US dollar's dominance into the entirety of the world via stablecoins. This is a government-backed, corporation-backed sentiment shift that I don't think the industry appreciates enough.
We are pro stablecoins on this show. I think I've told this story before. I was in, I believe it was Masari Mainnet in New York City, 2023 maybe, 2022 maybe. And I'm at a brunch, one of the last days of the conference, and it's like an accounting thing. There's a lot of like market makers and people there. Someone gets up, co-host gets up on the mic and goes, "Hey, we want to ask how many people currently pay their employees in stable coins." 50 people at least in this brunch. I'm the only one to raise my hand. And I think that I just proved that guy's point at the time, proving this point now that, this is something that we've believed in. It's something that we've done for the last 5-6 years. And so absolutely, this has been a game changer, not only for us, but for the industry as a whole. And I think more and more people are starting to come around to this. It was about time, because even in 2022 or 3, we just didn't see the kind of adoption and participation from the industry itself. Even within crypto, people were still relying on the old rails. And now what we're seeing is those other companies outside of the native space, Y Combinator here, are now saying, hey, we believe in this technology enough that we're going to use it as our main mode of financing these companies.
Yep. Shout out to YC. Shout out to Gary. Give him a round of applause here for investing $500K into YC. Let's get on here. YC switching to stablecoins. Why aren't you as a VC? All right, guys. Tether has just announced a new wallet. 570 million people trust Tether. Now there's a self-custodial mobile wallet powering USDT, USAT, XAUT, the tokenized gold product, and Bitcoin, on-chain, and Lightning Network. No more 0x crazy addresses, just a tether.me. You own your keys, safely backed up to your cloud, powered by Plasma, one of our Good Idea Ventures portfolio companies here as the Rollup and continues to invest in the future of finance. Let's watch this awesome video. I thought this was really, really cool. I think this is probably in El Salvador, if I had to guess, considering their ties there. I'm actually doing an El Salvador surf trip here in the coming weeks. Pretty excited about that. Let's watch this video.
Every morning, before the world notices, we are already moving. And the money also moves while we sleep. It always has.
Pones un par de friolitos con todo para llevar. Ahorita te los tengo, jefe.
But now, it's just ours. Moving money across the world shouldn't be an event. It should just work everywhere. Bitcoin, digital dollars.
ये तुम्हारा शादी का तोहफा है.
Suna?
Sona.
All in one place. With Tether Wallet, your username is your address.
Maestro, ¿a su caso se dete?
Sí, acá. Escaneas y listo.
One QR, any blockchain. Bitcoin,
Đã gửi tiền rồi.
Lightning, or on-chain.
Yeah, I got you, bro. Te mando el pago ahorita.
Empowered by USDT and USAT. Self-custodial. No 12 words to memorize. Just your email. Your keys, backed up to your cloud. Money has always belonged to the people who earn it. 550 million people trust Tether with theirs. This is their wallet.
No way. No way they got all those people to make the Tether logo.
No, dude, that's AI. Come on, Drew. Come on. 550 million people is a lot of people, though.
No, that's AI.
Yeah, of course it's AI. Come on. What are you doing, dude?
Man?
What is that? That's like 5% of the world, no?
570 million?
570 million out of 8 billion people?
Yeah, it's not bad, eh?
That's a pretty good distribution right there.
I mean, look, man, that video was awesome, man. I love the Spanish part of it. I think Plasma's underrepresented in this. I think Plasma's powering this entire wallet underneath in terms of being the payments layer. I think this is the massive breakthrough for that for that blockchain, for that company. I mean, if they can get this at scale, this thing will be rivaling Tron in no time. I'm sure they'll support Tron as well. We didn't get any insight there as to what kind of blockchains they will be supporting or who they're going to be supporting. But yeah, I mean, that video just got me fired up, man. If it's Plasma that is so bullish for us, that chart has gotten absolutely decimated. Let me just tap in there right now.
How are we looking?
Looking at 13 cents, not much movement on the back of this. But yeah, man, I mean,
okay.
I think this is Plasma coded. So
yeah. We'll see. We will find out here pretty soon. But yeah, I think this is probably the right move for Tether. You know, it's interesting. I mean, I could understand and see a strategy where they continue to verticalize. They've been making so many investments. Here comes a wallet. You know, we've seen a couple of these stablecoin chains, Plasma included.
Yep.
And so, you know, we could be in the midst of more of this verticalization from Tether because they have the distribution and they have the assets. So they own the asset layer, the distribution layer. When it comes to the product development layer, whether they acquire, they invest, or they build it out themselves, I think we're going to see more and more coming as a result from this. Tether's just a massive corporation, and they're just going to continue to make their U.S. push as well. Obviously, this video is pretty geared towards emerging markets.
Yeah,
but I think that's what we're going to continue to see.
Such an awesome video.
Oh yeah. Okay, what's up next?
Yeah,
let's see. Crypto has had a rough year. Maybe we should launch something to fix it. All right, so Nikita Beer here is obviously teasing a potential announcement. This is potentially huge news. You know, we saw the developer that was Xbase, Xave, got joined on Twitter. We kind of heard that this is something he does all the time. He gets, you know, big boosts from the founders at these companies when he joins. He had a viral photo with Elon. We're hearing that Twitter could be launching a wallet. That is what the rumor mill is spinning and saying. This would be something that's embedded to Twitter. It would allow users on Twitter to send money to one another. Twitter's also had an integration with Polymarket, I believe. And so we could see an account-based model where you can hold money on Twitter. You could deposit into it and then send stable coins potentially, as well as other cryptos to different users. This is what the speculators are saying now. There's also the Dogecoin angle to this. Obviously, Elon is huge proponent of Dogecoin. I believe he's a massive holder. And so there are things potentially in the works here that we could see play out as Twitter becomes more entrenched into the crypto game. Crypto is obviously a very general word. Do they mean stable coins? Do they mean wallet? Do they mean Dogecoin? Do they mean Bitcoin? Do they mean stable coins? We don't know as of now, but they did make that hire just a few weeks ago. Benji, I believe, is his name. Nikita's teasing it here. And so this is what we're seeing, and there's plenty to come of this. You know, I tend to think if we had, you know, think about the Libra project from Meta. That was a few years ago. And if that was occurring during the regime today, then we would have a very different reality as it comes to how social media is integrating with crypto and how distribution is is ultimately capitalized on when it comes to financial services. And so it's pretty exciting to see how Twitter, with massive amounts of distribution, could be getting into this landscape. Obviously, the wallet front, the stablecoin landscape. If they do launch some sort of custody product or non-custodial wallet, we know how this goes. Stablecoin would likely occur not too long thereafter. Think about what is currently happening with Polymarket. They have several billions of dollars in deposits on their platform. And so it makes sense for them to launch this stablecoin and earn all of that net interest income. I could foresee a Twitter stablecoin, an X coin, an X stablecoin could be coming to the platform sometime soon. Remains to be seen. Guys, that is our news portion for today. Alex Pruden is going to be in the tokenization tower, and we are going to head over to Andy and Alex in the tower. They're going to be discussing quantum as it relates to Bitcoin, which is something extremely pressing these days and a very hot topic as of late. So we're going to kick it over there. Quick standby in the meantime, and we will be with you very, very soon. Guys, don't go anywhere. Be right back.
Alrighty, guys. Alex, welcome to the tower, man. It's the tokenization tower. I'm not sure you've seen the view quite yet.
It's a nice view.
It's not bad. Welcome to New York. Are you a resident of New York? Are you visiting?
I'm visiting. Yeah, I live in Montana.
So really?
About as unlike New York as you can get.
Like cabin and
I do have a
acreage.
cabin. I do have a cabin, but I live in a small town called Bozeman, so outside of Yellowstone.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. So no animals or.
No, I don't have horses or anything like that. I had a dog, but I see a lot of animals, like elk and bears and stuff. But don't know any.
Man. Good, getting it. Well, obviously this quantum stuff has been very, very hot topic. Project 11, your company that you're the CEO of, is kind of addressing this head on, right? And I think for the longest time, this ecosystem in blockchain and digital assets has feared this, kind of pushed it under the rug. Now big names, Brian Armstrong is coming out. He's leading an initiative in this. He's been pretty publicly vocal about it as of late. This has been kind of going around after that Google paper. Maybe we just start with like where are we at today? A bit of a foundation as to what the state of Project 11 is and what you guys are doing to address this quantum problem.
Cool. So and maybe I'll just say, even before that, I'll say, what's the state of quantum today? So the first thing it's important to acknowledge is there's no quantum computer today that can break Bitcoin or any other digital asset. So this is a fear about what may come and how quickly it may come. So, Project 11, we founded the company to future-proof digital assets against a quantum threat, potentially. And this quantum threat has become more and more real over the last couple of years. There's been repeated experimental demonstrations and reductions in the resources that, the scientists at Google, among others, have shown that you need to break the cryptography underlying Bitcoin, right? So, there's one aspect of it is that quantum is moving faster than it used to. The second aspect of it is that blockchains and digital assets rely so much on public key cryptography, and the risk is really existential compared to many other systems. And the fix is potentially more difficult because these are decentralized, right? Not your keys, not your crypto. There's no management company for Ethereum or Bitcoin or whoever. So the fix is going to be a little bit more involved, and so that was really kind of the modus. That's the reason why we founded Project 11 ultimately.
Yeah. And so on the state of how critical this kind of is, people have different opinions and prescriptions as to how they think this is going to play out and the time frame and the level of seriousness. Where do you personally stand on that?
I think it's critical, and I think it's critical. I think you can say it's critical and you can say it's urgent without having to put a timeline on quantum computing, because I think, frankly, any number of people can come up and tell you what their opinion is about quantum computing, and I have an opinion, but I think what is, I think it's just uncertain how quickly scientists at Google, at Caltech, at IBM, at any of these places, or China, will actually realize this technology. I mean, look at AI. AI went from kind of this thing that didn't seem like much was changing for years and years, and then it exploded. Maybe it'll be like that, or fusion power, where it's still dragging a while. I mean, we just don't know. But I think the reason why I think it's critical is because of the critical impact it has on blockchains. And blockchains will use public key cryptography for effectively identity and authentication, right? Your Bitcoin address is where I send money to, and then I send you money by signing a message using my private key. Only the owner of the private key is able to send money. So as the owner, right? But if a quantum computer is able to reverse engineer the private key from the public key, in a very real sense, they own everything. Yeah. And so it kind of breaks the entire philosophical model of ownership in crypto. And that's unique to crypto. Like no other area of the world or the internet that uses public key cryptography has that deep of a dependency. So because the threat is critical, we need to prioritize it urgently, I think, over everything else.
Yeah. And I think on the Bankless podcast a couple of days ago, Saylor said that he's not worried about it. That on the Bitcoin front, they would just do a community hard fork if they needed to, and problem's gonna be solved. We don't even need your company. Why are you even here, Alex? I think that the ossification of Bitcoin is going to prevent that. And I was arguing with Rob today about it. I was like, look, I don't think Saylor can just come in and dictate what the core devs are going to do. But he seems certain. He literally he kind of went in and basically went against all this Ethereum kind of takes and just stood his ground and said, no, we're gonna be fine. You guys are over focusing on this, over fixating on this. Stop. If we need to do a hard fork, we'll do a hard fork. Kind of like he's like the central command of Bitcoin.
I mean, Saylor is among many things a great salesman. Yeah. So I don't doubt that he delivered a strong pitch. Look, I mean, if saying it made it true, then I don't know, where would we be in blockchains? We'd be on Mars already. We'd have blockchains with trillions of transactions per second. Bitcoin would scale to infinity and be worth $1 trillion. Look, at the end of the day, you can say all these things, and I don't disagree that it's possible to solve. So that's one important thing to know. I'm not necessarily a doomsayer that crypto's screwed. No, I think I believe we can overcome this, and I even believe even more strongly. I was at the MIT Bitcoin conference yesterday, and people asked, "Hey, what's your 10 out of 10 or 1 out of 10? How do you rate the chances of Bitcoin surviving in the future?" And my answer is 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Some version of Bitcoin and every digital asset will definitely survive this. It's just a question of how much chaos do we want to experience along the way. Yeah. And I think we all want to experience a smooth transition because that means, price stability and infrastructure stability and no one's losing money and people have renewed faith, not less faith in these digital assets. So if we want that outcome, we have to prepare for the worst case scenario. So even though Saylor may be right, he's not worried about it, people will ultimately hard fork, that doesn't take away from the enormous amount of work that has to be done, and especially has to be done if he's wrong about quantum timelines.
Yeah. Is the common understanding that proof of work is more susceptible to quantum than proof of stake, is that accurate?
It's inaccurate. Proof of work is actually more secure than proof of stake, and the reason is proof of work uses hash functions, which technically have a quantum vulnerability, but practically speaking, it's not really going to be feasible to do a quantum attack against proof of work in the short term. Proof of stake uses, what is proof of stake? A bunch of validators signing messages and sending them to each other. These signatures can be forged, just like that's the same way you would steal assets. And so that has to be addressed. So if anything, I think it's the inverse. Proof of stake is actually a little bit more vulnerable than proof of work, but it's hard to say whether Bitcoin is worse off than Ethereum, or if Ethereum is worse off than Solana. Look, all of these chains face a unique set of challenges that are fundamentally existential. And I wouldn't necessarily say that one chain has it better or worse.
Yeah. So that's a misconception then.
In my opinion, that's a misconception.
Yeah. And okay, so then what would be the kind of logical process to build a quantum resistant kind of blockchain, right? I think Starkware just put out a really interesting piece about their kind of quantum resistant fix if they were to kind of make that run into changing the actual, the actual blockchain of Bitcoin. What does that progression look like to build towards a quantum resistant network? Is it a one, flip of a switch in terms of like a hard fork, or is it multiple progressions? Like what is some of the work that you guys are doing there?
Yeah, I mean, so I just use this opportunity to acknowledge that, I think there's some sentiment. Some people, I think, feel as though some people are saying that there's no work being done on Bitcoin, post-quantum cryptography.
Yeah.
And I think that's not true. I mean, like, you see the Starkware stuff, that's an example of some work. I mean, others have done work. There's been proposals over the years to do this or that post-quantum thing. And that's all great. So I want to acknowledge that and say it's good, but I also want to say that's insufficient. And I'll say the same thing about the Starkware paper. The Starkware paper described using some very old and in some cases deprecated logic, a way to, in an emergency, use, have this kind of very complicated technique that, by the way, would require, a lot of money to run, like a GPU hours to run, to prevent your coins from being stolen once. So if you did a transaction, you would ensure that your coins would not be stolen. But then if you did another transaction, you'd be vulnerable and you have to do that same thing again. And by the way, this does nothing for like Satoshi's coins or exchange wallets or anything like that with exposed public keys. So look, and this is actually a good way to kind of showcase, and because I think this is another common misconception, is people like, okay, people are doing something about it, we're all fine. There's many levels of doing something about it. And one thing that's unique about crypto compared to a lot of other systems is, there are layers that have to be considered here. The protocols all have to change. The cryptography, the post-quantum cryptography that we're talking about has to get integrated in these protocols. And this post-quantum cryptography is very different than ECC. You can't just, it's not just a trivial swap in, swap out. Then you have all the infrastructure providers, or in the case of Ethereum or Solana, smart contracts. Those all have to then redeploy or basically rejigger how their systems plug into the underlying blockchains. And then when that's done, all of the users with assets in whatever wallets they're using have to move. Every single person. There's not a world in which you can just stay with what you have and be post-quantum secure, right? And so this is just what, like, the term I like to use is a full lift and shift.
Yeah.
Everything, every protocol is going to change. Every smart contract is going to redeploy. Every user's balance is going to move from one place to another. And, if you think about that in the context of prior crypto transitions, even big ones, going from ETH1 to ETH2 or Taproot for Bitcoin, I mean, nothing has ever been done to this scale. And so this is sort of why it's like, yes, people are doing stuff. Yes, there are cool ideas, but the gap between that and where we need to go is still enormous. And I think we have to acknowledge that.
Yeah. There's really two forces right now that are offsetting the previous Lindy of blockchains and of DeFi and smart contracts. It's this Claude mythos AI white hat, if you will. I can find any bug in any smart contract very, very quickly, better than any hacker, better than any human, and then quantum. And I think it's really shaking the boots of investors, specifically those on chain, thinking about the future of this kind of landscape. How do these two go together, like AI and quantum? Is there any kind of tie in there?
I mean, quite frankly, well, I mean, yes. I mean, first off, people in quantum use AI to do various things to accelerate quantum. And then you can imagine a sufficiently advanced AI could leverage a quantum computer as a subroutine to do some kind of specialized attack. But look, I think the higher level, easier way for people to conceptualize this is there are two flavors of the same thing. This thing is that we don't have, there's like no mathematical proof that the cryptography that we're using is secure for all time. Why do we trust it? We trust it because no one has broken it up to this point, right? You mentioned Lindy law. This is like, there's a big Lindy law effect happening where, that has happened with cryptography over time. But with the advent of quantum computing and the advent of advanced AI, we may end up in a world where attackers are continually evolving and the lifespans of these various cryptographic algorithms or these smart contract systems starts to go down. That doesn't mean that blockchains or cryptocurrencies are dead. But what it does mean is that ossification becomes very dangerous.
Yeah.
Because you're effectively betting against all of the innovation that's happening in all of these different areas that it's never going to go obsolete. And quantum is just the most obvious example of this, right? And it's most obvious because for 30 years, people have known that these, like a quantum algorithm could break the cryptography underlying Bitcoin. but people just rationalize by saying, it's always going to be 20 years away. And now we're facing a potential scenario where it may not be. Yeah. And then people are realizing, wow, we really baked in all of these assumptions pretty deeply. And now to fix this is going to be hard. And so what this implies, and one of the philosophies that we have at Project 11 is this concept of crypto agility. Like you have to have the ability to, relatively quickly and seamlessly swap in or swap out different cryptographic assumptions in case one gets broken, or for different use cases. I mean, that's going to be the world that we move to, I think.
Okay, so talk to me about so as a user who's done tens of thousands of transactions on different blockchains, how will my experience change? Like if public key cryptography, the exposing of the public key is causing a significant security issue within the private key, how will my experience of interacting on chain change in a post-quantum world? Like, what does that mean for actual users of these things?
Well, first off, if your public key is exposed, and so let's just talk about that for a second. So Bitcoin, most people use addresses, which addresses are hashed public keys. Hash is used in proof of work, and like I said earlier, hash functions are more secure against a quantum computer. So the UTXOs that are basically underneath these hashed addresses are more or less safe for now. Okay. Now it's the exposed public keys on Bitcoin, like where people have sent from the same address twice, or it's like older addresses that Satoshi's coins, for example. Those are at risk of potential near-term quantum attack for the first generation of quantum computers. The story changes when you get to the smart contract blockchains, Ethereum, Solana, right? Because the way we use it is our accounts, right? Think about DeFi. I think about ENS. Like I pick a name and I associate with an ETH address. It doesn't really make sense to always constantly re-rotate the address underneath. It's meant to be static, right? Yeah. And so that means there's more public key exposure, right? So there's basically anywhere there's public key exposure across any of these networks, people have risk of their funds being stolen. Now, assume that there is a migration. How does the experience change? It changes in a couple ways. First of all, the cryptography that's being looked at to deploy in these contexts is more expensive. It's more expensive in terms of the sizes of these signatures are bigger. In some cases, the cost to verify the signatures or to sign goes up, right? So this has implications for hardware wallets and limited user devices that may not have the same, or be older or something that don't have the same features as a modern device. It has implications for cost on chain. Gas, for example, right? Higher verification costs mean more gas. And then the last thing I would say is, this elliptic curve cryptography really enabled so many nice features around threshold signing and multi-sig stuff. And there's, BIP32 where you can derive many, many keys from a single seed, or from a single public key. Yeah. None of those things translate over necessarily to the post-quantum world. We have to rebuild all of them. So quite honestly, from a user experience standpoint, if you put all this post-quantum stuff in today, it would be kind of a UX downgrade from what exists. And crypto is already not known for having the best UX. That's right. And so this is, again, one more reason why it's important to prepare and to start preparing early to ensure that we can transition safely and not have to destroy the UX that we've taken a long time to build.
Yeah, and to build up for. Yeah.
Exactly.
What's interesting then is something like Zcash is interesting from the post-quantum angle, because yes, there is a public key that is part of the Zcash algorithm, the way that if I were to send you some ZEC, that's how it works. But the whole aspect of the private key and the shielded nature of it completely changes the dynamic versus the public key cryptography setting with something like Bitcoin. Is it fair to say that Zcash is far more quantum resistant than Bitcoin?
In my opinion, no. I think Zcash is a really cool system, and I do think there are aspects of it where the problem is not as acute. But Zcash has a couple of problems of its own, one of which is that a lot of this ZEC in circulation is not in the shielded pool. It's just public. So in that case, you're kind of just like Bitcoin. You're no better off. The second is there's actually multiple shielded pools over, as Zcash has gone through upgrades. Again, this is like in blockchain, you can't migrate everyone's funds. Yeah. People have to migrate their individual funds. So as every time Zcash has done an upgrade, there have been these like shielded pools that is kind of like the V1 shielded pool is still there. For those older shielded pools, they rely heavily on these elliptic curve assumptions that, enables you to break Bitcoin. And the problem there is taking advantage of those assumptions means not only can you steal coins potentially, but you can actually mint money. and you can mint money in a way that's totally undetectable, right? So it's kind of, you know, so I mean, theoretically, you could address this by deprecating some of these older shielded pools. But my point is, again, like, you know, there's no one chain that's really better or worse. Everyone has effectively the same, you know, or just a different set of the same flavor of problems from the dependency that we all have had on elliptic curve cryptography.
Well, actually, that question stems from this paper because there's the, you know, Zcash bulls, quantum resistant, you know, swap your Bitcoin to Zcash because we're going to be the quantum resistant version. But then Google comes out with this paper and Algorand is the blockchain mentioned as the leader of quantum resistance in blockchains. Do you buy that?
I mean, my take is that everyone is kind of vulnerable in their own way. Algorand has, I believe, an implementation of a post-quantum, of a post-quantum transaction type based on an algorithm called Falcon, which is one of the ones that NIST is considering standardizing for the broader internet for their post-quantum cryptography, for the internet's post-quantum cryptography. So I guess maybe it's fair to say Algorand is ahead in terms of something exists that users could theoretically move to, but how many people use it today? I mean, very, very few, and very, very few, very, very little funds are actually secured in there. So, you know, I don't think it's fair to say even in Algorand's case, this is an open and shut case, we're done. Right. By the way, Falcon, like all these other post-quantum signature schemes, is bigger and slower and worse in a lot of ways. So it's like, again, I don't think we're done. And even Algorand is not, I don't think it's fair to call that post-quantum truly.
Yeah, and I think if you recall as well, there was like 3 or 4 other small companies listed in this paper. Yeah. Some of which had like sub $100 million market caps and went on like a crazy run for a day there, which I thought was absolutely silly. Any comments on those specific companies that were mentioned? Is there anything that we should be looking at from the kind of research perspective, from the investors' perspective, as to like companies that are doing real work in this field? I know Google mentioned a couple. I can't bring them up off the top of my head, but where are we at on that front?
Yeah, there's a whole bevy, some of which that Google mentioned, of these like, you know, quantum resistant layer ones. And the idea is basically you're just saying, hey, look, you know, all this elliptic curve cryptography is broken. Let's just make a new layer one and make it quantum resistant from the get-go, right? Like the reality is, beyond Q-Day, the day that a quantum computer shows up, you know, everything has to be made quantum secure or it's busted, right? So, you know, if you don't believe that existing blockchains can actually affect a migration, then I think but you still believe in blockchains, then I think you have to be bullish some of these much, much smaller chains. I think the challenge there, though, is, you know, it's a cold start problem, right? Everyone believes in Bitcoin. You have Michael Saylor talking about how Bitcoin, you know, they've launched their Stretch product, and, you know, there's so much buy-in and adoption of these existing digital assets that if you're one of these new layer one quantum resistant networks, you're starting from zero and you've got to convince everyone to sell something they've already basically decided that they want. Yeah. And, you know, on this basis that they won't be able to actually migrate, right? And so, you know, like I said, it's all a set of trade-offs. The network that I would highlight here is, you know, I think doing a reasonably good job of at least having a plan to solve this is Ethereum. I think so. That Google paper was co-authored by Justin Drake of the Ethereum Foundation. And I think they have acknowledged that this could be not only a threat, but an opportunity, right? Because they realize that if other blockchains don't move past this point, then there's an opportunity to potentially grow market share. And by the way, I think this applies to any blockchain. It's a competitive opportunity for, you know, these blockchains to maybe grow market share versus chains that don't migrate or migrate slower. So, you know, Ethereum has done a good job of, like, you know, basically prioritizing it internally. Yeah. Now, look, again, like I said before, saying it doesn't make it true. So we got to see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, do you really envision Q-Day to happen? Like, is that a certainty in your mind that this could, because I just could see just a world where it just never happens. We just never get there.
Yeah. So look, I mean, there is no, you know, guarantee that a quantum computer ever exists. To be clear, there's also no proof anywhere that a quantum computer will never exist or won't exist in the near term, right? So I think, you know, you could, even physicists argue about this, right? Yeah. So, I mean, the reality is I don't think anyone knows. You know, my personal belief is there's a better chance than not that a quantum computer arrives within a decade. Okay. That's like, so 50-50, in my view. And there's a possibility that it arrives even before this decade is out. I believe that for a couple of reasons. One, the tremendous progress that quantum computing has made in just the last 2 years. Two, the opinions of many experts. There's a global kind of risk survey that's released every year that they survey cryptographers and physicists, and they say, hey, how likely is Q-Day going to be in this time? So, those estimates have come down.
Yeah.
Quantum company roadmaps. You obviously these are bullish, but still, they've kind of crossed the threshold of this initial, systems, and now they're thinking about scaling, and their roadmaps have you at the number of qubits you would need to break cryptography by 2030, right? And then the last way is we have our own assessment based on some research we'll be releasing soon, where look, if you just kind of do some napkin math and say, hey, I have this many qubits, I have this kind of high error rate, I have these constraints, and I just assume they're going to grow by a few percent every year, you basically within 10 years you get to the scale that you need to get to, right? So look, it could very well turn out that some fundamental physics prevents it from ever reaching that point. But again, I think betting against that is a bad idea because if it's wrong, if that bet is wrong, well then, trillions of dollars of value goes up in smoke.
Well, I think a lot of people use Q-Day as this bear case for crypto, for digital assets, right? And you clearly have strong reasoning to believe it is going to come based on, past evidence, plus your extended experience, plus your entire life's work. Might be a little bit of bias in there, but we'll just keep rocking with it.
I like to say I'm the most bullish person in crypto, right? Because I acknowledge that quantum is an existential risk threatening everything, basically. But I also believe fundamentally that blockchains have a role to play in finance, and it's an ever increasing, an ever more important one. And so I'm very bullish on the existence of blockchains after Q-Day. In fact, that's what Project 11 is all about building. So if anything, my time horizons are way longer than most people. So that's sort of why I like to joke that I'm the most bullish person, even though I sometimes, I'm obviously raising awareness about this critical threat. But I do that because I believe in the importance of this asset class.
Right.
And I believe that in order to save it, people have to get out of their seats and do something. And this is actually something when I advocate, for people a lot, or, at various conferences, people are, hey, what should people do? I mean, obviously you got to secure your own assets. But one other thing is look, one of the powerful thing about decentralized blockchains is it's not just one central authority, it's a community. But just because, the power is diffused among the community does not mean that we don't all have a responsibility to advocate for and try and contribute to, maintaining what makes these systems work, right? Yeah. We can't just basically the worst case scenarios are some kind of reverse bystander effect where it's you're well, you're doing something right. No, you're doing something right. I'll just sit over here and wait for something to happen because then nothing will happen and it'll all fall down, right? And so I think, we can't get comfortable with the success that crypto's had. We can't take as a guarantee that it will continue to succeed. We have to work hard to make it succeed, and we have to work hard to make sure that it survives Q-Day.
Yeah, but I think I agree with that sentiment, and I think that that's the right way to be framing this. But isn't there going to be a lot bigger problems if Q-Day comes than just a couple $1 trillion of assets on blockchains? This has got to be a minuscule problem compared to the relative scale of what could happen from databases to ledgers to governments to banks to world information flow to telecom. Are we not talking about small peanuts here?
I mean, look, I think this is a myth, and I always like to take the opportunity to bust it. I mean, many systems around the world use public key cryptography today and are exposed to a quantum attack.
Yeah.
The difference, though, is with blockchains is most of these systems are under some kind of centralized authority. Let's take a good example. I think arguably the best example is SWIFT, right?
Yeah.
SWIFT is basically the international payment system, and it's run effectively by a group of international financial institutions. Look, if a quantum attacker were somehow to use a quantum computer to break SWIFT, which, by the way, it's not even clear exactly how that attack would work. Whereas with Bitcoin, it's very clear. I get your key, I get your private key, I sign for you. That's it's you kind of have to hand wave a bunch of how the actual SWIFT attack works. But even if you do that, guess what? SWIFT is run by a bunch of international financial institutions. If they see something they didn't approve, whether or not it was a quantum computer, they're just going to take their erasers and be and then it's going to go back to what it was, right? So, and this is true of most systems. Two things are true of most systems. Is A, these central authorities have the ability to roll back whatever they didn't intend to happen, and two, they have the ability to coordinate a response more effectively. And the third thing is that the cryptography is one of many layers of security, right? against a potential hack or something like that. You know, again, think about if I use a quantum computer to get your bank credentials and man in the middle of your connection, and then I try and log into your bank account and wire all the money out. Well, your bank is probably going to like call you or something, or maybe there's some two-factor going on. Like it's just virtual, but blockchain, none of that's true, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to coordinate a response. If something bad happens, rolling it back is possible, but very damaging. Like think about ETH and ETH Classic, right? How controversial that was.
Yep.
You know, and again, like if an attack happens, there is no second factor. Like there's no fallback. There's no extra approval. If there was, it would be no different in a bank, right? And by the way, maybe the last thing why blockchains are vulnerable is like you don't really, because of all the complexity, like I mentioned, around these real world attacks, you don't really know what the payoff of that is going to be. But I can tell you right now what the payoff would be for one of Satoshi's wallets, right? I mean, it's right there on the blockchain. There's Bitcoin. I can put a price on that Bitcoin. I know exactly what I'm going to get. And so, look, again, does this mean that the first quantum computer, you know, the first entity with a quantum computer is going to attack Bitcoin? Not necessarily. But I think if you look at Bitcoin and you are economically, or, you know, digital assets and you're economically rational, it's probably hard to rule out.
Yeah. But then even if that happened, wouldn't that just send the whole thing to like, if the network was able to be altered with and exploited with because of quantum computing, wouldn't thus then the value of the network just end up not being valuable? Right? Like if I took my quantum computer and hacked Satoshi's coins, then it would be over.
I mean, there's a debate about this. I think in my opinion, it's certainly true that if someone was able to sign transactions and it wasn't the original owner, many people would view that as a violation of one of the fundamental principles of
100%.
blockchain. That said, there's a bunch of things, you know, in markets. Markets aren't always rational. Like it may not go to zero.
Yeah.
And furthermore, I think in the Bitcoin community specifically, like this concept, you know, there's a debate around whether or not to burn Satoshi's coins or to just leave them. And the argument for leaving them, and by the way, leaving them means letting a quantum computer steal them. The argument for letting a quantum computer steal them is that, like, look, we as the community don't have a right to take those coins from whoever owns them, Satoshi, right? And you know, so even though a quantum computer might steal them, maybe Satoshi intended that all along. That's some people's view. Or B, you know, but B, like two wrongs don't make a right. Like, so just because a quantum computer can steal them, us stealing it first doesn't mean stealing is right.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a deep philosophical conflict here, right? Because I mean, self-sovereignty is a key feature that differentiates blockchains from other financial systems. So it's hard. And again, what's the upshot here? The upshot is these issues are deep. It's going to take time to come to consensus and then ultimately fix them. And we got to start now. If we don't want to rush, because the rushing is where you'll see lots of money lost. The rushing is where you'll see, you know, cryptography fail, just either because, you know, the classical cryptography was kind of rushed in implementation or a quantum computer showed up before we're ready. I mean, waiting and being wrong is the worst case outcome. So, but starting early and potentially being wrong, you say you're right and quantum computer never shows up. Okay, whatever. Well, now we know that like it's safe for all time, right? So like, what's the real downside there? Yeah. And that's sort of my view.
Well, we might never know if it takes a long time. Exactly. It might just always be maybe coming.
Most important words that everyone should take away from the show is we might never know, and we don't really know. And because of that, we should just be conservative and be proactive in protecting these networks that I think we've all come to value.
Yeah. All right, so switching gears off of quantum, I wanted to talk to you about the Stretch product. I'm sure you have some insight into that from your conversations with friends, whether it be Nick Carter, other Bitcoin Maxis friends, etc. This guy is absolutely cooking right now. Saylor is absolutely firing the ATM. I think $1 billion yesterday in volume on the Stretch product today. Or I woke up this morning and it was already at a couple $100 million firing. You bought another $1 billion of Bitcoin using this preferred credit product. It's just, there's just absolutely financial engineering going on. Is this sustainable? What is happening with Stretch? Maybe just kind of like educate us a bit on like what this is, if you can, and kind of your take on it.
Yeah, so I think, so by the way, bread and butter for me is quantum and post-quantum blockchains and, you know, and kind of the traditional stuff, but I'll give you my quick take. You know, my understanding of this product is effectively like, You know, these are you know, coupons where you get like earn 11% interest basically by buying them, and basically this is funded by, you know, you give Saylor cash, he buys Bitcoin, and then theoretically the Bitcoin goes up, and then dividends, you know, are used to basically pay you the interest and, you know, buy more Bitcoin potentially. So he's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, there have been the treasury companies, you know, including MicroStrategy, are all variants of this, right? I mean, this one is kind of differentiated by this interest payment, right? This coupon. But they're all variants of the same theme. So on the one hand, I think it's really, I mean, it's honestly surprised me that you haven't seen companies do this before. Like, for example, let's think about two companies that have been in the blockchain space for a long time: Blockstream for Bitcoin and Consensus for Ethereum, right? Like, you know, I think even though both Adam Back and Joe Lubin have their own DATs now, I think it kind of like if you go back in time when those companies were founded, they probably should have been doing this at the beginning, right? And there is, I think, something smart about financially engineering, you know, these products in order to kind of insulate, you know, whatever company that you or whatever network you fundamentally believe in from this price volatility, and basically taking advantage of structurally buying the dip. That seems very smart, and it seems like it makes sense for someone like MicroStrategy to do, or, you know, for others, you know, companies like Consensus and Blockstream. Like I said, you know, the challenge is, ultimately in these infinite money machines, it works when everything's only going up. It works,
of course.
And then the question is, when it starts going down, what happens, right? And, you know, obviously there are answers that people will give, like, oh, we'll buy more Bitcoin. And I think Saylor's been on record being like, oh, we could pay this for X number of years. You know, look, you never really know until it happens, right? Like, how many times have we seen crypto where it's like Terra Luna, right? We're like, this is the infinite
people are
money
comparing
machine.
it to Terra Luna.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's fair, but they're comparing the same concept. Deposit your capital, get this UST token, put it into this pool, get the 20%. We're going to use this to just keep funding this Luna buyback. And they're comparing it to the largest crypto asset in the world and MicroStrategy.
You know, look, and it works until it doesn't, you know? And so I think, you know, this time could be different, to be clear. And you know, far be it for me to be a markets expert. But, you know, I think there is that risk. And, you know, that said, Bitcoin is a huge asset, very liquid, and there's a lot of reasons. You know, like I said, I'm very long digital assets and Bitcoin, and I think there's a lot of reasons to believe that Bitcoin's value will go up independent of this, you know, over time, especially if we fix the quantum issue. So look, it may be the right move, and it may be different. But yeah, it's you know, leverage is leverage, so it can always potentially go the other way.
Yeah, and on this note, you expressed your idea that Ethereum was actually broadly better positioned, likely across all the smart contract blockchains in the quantum race, even compared to Bitcoin. Has that changed your portfolio allocation or the way that you think about allocating to Ethereum versus Bitcoin? I think a lot of people are like putting the flag in the sand here and saying ETH Bitcoin ratios bottomed, like quantum threat is here. You know, like how much credence do you kind of give to this view and to this idea that Ethereum could sustainably outperform Bitcoin just because of quantum fears?
This is great. This question, you know, I'm speaking at a Bitcoin conference up next on Thursday, and whatever I say to this question is definitely teeing up some very angry commenters or questioners. So that's good. But no, look, like I said, fundamentally, I believe every blockchain structurally has a different set of risks, no different than the other. I do believe personally that the Ethereum Foundation has been proactive at acknowledging this risk that I'm obviously close to and believe in. And so, you know, for me personally, it definitely made me longer on Ethereum than I was. You know, another protocol that deserves highlighting is Solana. You know, I mentioned we maybe I can't remember if I mentioned, but, you know, we did some work with them and we implemented some post-quantum cryptography on their testnet. You know, and that, yeah, and so that I think shows that they are also interested in solving this problem. And so I want to give them some credit too. So look, I'm long any blockchain that ultimately I think, you know, has some product market fit today and has a credible path to reaching beyond to existing beyond Q-Day. And even Bitcoin, I think, does. Yep. And I'm long Bitcoin on a long enough timeline, but I definitely think, you know, if we don't handle it right with Bitcoin, there's a lot of choppy waters ahead. But yeah, I think Ethereum does deserve credit. You know, I personally have kind of been longer them as a result of that. You know, again, words are not deeds, and so it could be misplaced. But and generally speaking, maybe let me just comment on I think the impact of the quantum narrative on the markets. I don't necessarily think it's caused anyone to be short any of these things, but I think it maybe you've got potentially people that would allocate to this asset class that maybe haven't, because there's this uncertainty around, is quantum going to be a thing, and how's it going to impact blockchains? Is the price going to go down? So I think if we solve that root issue, then you see maybe prices go up more than they would.
You think that's more on the institutional investor class that would have those fears?
I think so. Yeah, but that's what moves the needle, right?
Right.
Like, at this point, right? Blockchains have been adopted. I mean, we've won in many ways, right? Like, I mean, I got into the space over 10 years ago. At the time, Bitcoin's only use case was crime. They legitimately talked about banning it. Now you have BlackRock issuing ETFs. You have stable coins, the tens of billions of dollars. I mean, we won in many ways, right? And so, and the institutional adoption is an indicator of that. But because we won and we're at the scale now, then we have to consider what the marginal next institution is doing. Are they waiting? Are they going in? And I think quantum is certainly a factor affecting at least some of those conversations.
All right, Alex, last thing from me. What is the kind of primary focus for Project 11? I mean, it sounds silly. It's like, okay, solve quantum, but like, what are you guys doing, right? Week by week, month over month. What does Q2, Q3, Q4 look like for your company?
Yeah, so future-proofing digital assets is first and foremost our priority. So what does that look like? We've released some products for Bitcoin, one called Yellow Pages, where it's basically like you can think of it as like a quasi-migration tool where you can get ready to kind of migrate your Bitcoin. It doesn't let you migrate yet because there's got to be a lot of protocol work, but it's a first step. So we launched that. It's the only post-quantum tool for Bitcoin in production. It's been audited using post-quantum cryptography that's standardized by NIST. We've got some other products that are building on that are actually help you secure digital assets against the quantum risk on other networks. So those are two products we've been building, and we've got some institutional stuff too that we're working on, because I mean, you can imagine this has a huge impact on digital asset custodians, on all kinds of institutions, exchanges, right, that rely on these underlying blockchains that have to change ultimately to survive. So that's another big focus. We also have some fun initiatives. One I'll talk about is the Q-Day Prize. So Q-Day Prize was an initiative we ran last year that's getting ready to wrap up. We're getting ready to announce the results, but basically it was a challenge for people around the world to use existing quantum computers to try and break the biggest keys that they could. And and in the future iteration of this, I think what we're looking to do is not only let people use AI in addition to quantum computers to try and see how big of a key they could break to kind of inform what the state of progress is, but also use AI to build new and potentially better post-quantum crypto systems that have some of the features that we already like in ECC, that are a little more performant in terms of size or scale. Because we talked about AI earlier as being like another one of these doomsday weapons, but as everyone who probably watches this show who's used AI knows, it's an amazing tool, right?
100%.
And we can use it for good too. And so that's something that we're very interested in doing. And then I guess maybe on the optimistic side too, I'll end by saying this: quantum is not just a tool to break cryptography. It can be the basis for new forms of cryptography, right? There's ways to exchange keys in a completely secure manner without ever touching a classical channel that could never be broken based on the physics underlying the universe, right? Like that's what we kind of say at Project 11, future proofing and future building.
Yep.
The quantum computer is going to Q-Day is going to happen. We got to future proof everything. But beyond that point, there's a whole world of opportunity to basically leverage quantum computing and quantum mechanics to build a whole new, better blockchain. Or better blockchains. And so that's really ultimately the long-term vision of Project 11. And that's a little bit of what we got going on today.
I still can't tell if I'm just absolutely smooth brain. I just don't know if Q-Day is going to come. Like, I'm not a believer. I think everything's going to be okay. Perpetual optimist over here.
Hey, well, there's nothing wrong with optimism. So, I like to
misguided optimism can be dangerous.
I like to take my optimism with a dose of preparedness, but
yes,
there's
exactly.
nothing wrong with being optimistic. At the end of the day, it's just too miserable to live life otherwise.
I think somebody asked if the submissions are still being reviewed for the prize.
Yeah, so the submissions have just been reviewed, and so we have actually some winners. So someone who's watching this is like, I submitted something.
Yeah, exactly.
We're gonna announce in the next couple of weeks. I think either during or right before Bitcoin Vegas.
Awesome, Alex. Thanks for joining us. Great conversation, guys. We'll be right back with our next guest, last one of the show. Thanks for watching. We're live here in the Empire State Building in New York City. Be right back. Yes, sir. Already cowed out. What's going on, Rob? Welcome back to the show, man.
Takeaways from Alex Pruden.
I don't know, man. I tried to tell him that Q Day isn't gonna happen, but he wouldn't buy that. I mean,
Wow.
I was being perpetually optimistic as usual. He was super bullish on Ethereum, saying that Ethereum is far best prepared for Q Day compared to other blockchains. Even when, as far as to say that Ethereum has shifted to a larger part of his personal portfolio. Also, Zcash being more quantum resistant than Bitcoin is a myth. Doesn't really apply. There's so many deprecated, shielded pools. And yeah, Zcash is not as relevant. I asked him about Algorand because it was in the paper. Also kind of said that yes, there is some work there, but with any and all quantum resistant solutions, it's heavier, it's more clunky, it's not as fast and easy. Basically, if Q-Day happens, the entire smart contract ecosystem is going to need complete re-updating, revamping entirely. So, pretty wild.
Interesting to hear that you are a Q-Day non-believer.
Yeah.
I heard him say that he likes his optimism with a dose of preparedness, which I felt was a really, really solid quote. The state of affairs right now is that AI is currently digging into some of that smart contract landscape. And so we aren't quite at Q-Day, but we are starting to see more and more exploits. I wonder if it is part of AI. I have a feeling that it is.
Yeah.
And so right now, Cow Swap, which, look, I think was one of the best tools out there in terms of being able to aggregate different prices, different price routes. They're working to resolve it. The back end and the APIs were not impacted.
Wow.
It seems like it was just the front end. But go ahead, revoke your approvals anyway. Just a little PSA out there to the crypto crowd. Let's see what else we got before.
Somebody said, imagine getting drained for all your money and hearing moo.
It's a pretty funny noise every time you make
It's
a swap.
not good,
there.
man. It's not good.
Let's go ahead and cycle through. See what else we got here before we bring up Tom Dunleavy, our resident VC.
So did you cancel all your approvals on CowSwap?
Yeah, I feel like better safe than sorry. And I have used CowSwap in the past.
I have too. I've not checked my wallets at all today though, but yeah, wouldn't be great.
Yeah. So, I haven't heard anything about, funds being drained. The DNS hijacking, I don't even really understand. Like, I think that's just the front end, right? So if your wallets are connected to the front end, maybe you just don't sign anything new and you're okay. Tough to tell, but yeah, obviously better to be safe than sorry. You can always reconnect once you know that things are free and clear.
Insane. Okay. I think we have Tom ready to join the show. So looking forward to getting him on and talking about some of the VC side. In the meantime, I think we had a friend, Mike from Blockworks, saying that he doesn't expect a Bitcoin all-time high for 3 to 5 years.
Yeah,
this comes after Bitcoin's trading at that 75K mark today. I wonder why he thinks this.
Yeah, that was my question as well. It seems like if we get some sort of tokenization super cycle, maybe that occurs off of Bitcoin, and we could see the on-chain applications like we're talking about. All these assets end up on chain. They end up in these DeFi protocols. Bitcoin may not stand to benefit from that, but you got to think that these things are so correlated. Even if the rising tide happens away from Bitcoin, maybe Bitcoin lags a little bit, but 3 to 5 years?
I don't know. No, that's a weird take, but maybe he's right. You always have to be of the understanding that Mike may be privy to information that we are not. But I don't think that's what that is. I think it's just a contrarian bear take at the time when a lot of people are bullish at resistance. A lot of people are like really bullish right now, and it's no surprise that we're hovering around a large resistance level. So anyway, without further ado, guys, we've got Tom Dunleavy, the head of venture at Varus Capital, coming up. Tom is a friend of the show and put out a viral tweet about the crypto VC reset in funding and in interest. And this comes at a time where people are saying that he has spurred the VC market back into shape and back into interest. I saw many quote tweets from his post talking about different types of funds that are actually allocating right now. And people kind of got fired up about this. So why don't we bring Tom up? Friend of the show. I think it's been about a year since we had him on. Tom, welcome back. Good to have you, man.
Hey, gents. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Quite the post. I'm not sure you expected that your VC reset take to spur into where it has today.
I've put a version of this out publicly and privately probably like 5 or 10 times even, and for some reason folks resonated with this one, hit a nerve. So no, I'm excited to chat about it. It seems like it shook a lot of folks out of the woodwork. So I think a lot of the data speaks for itself, though. So excited to dig into the numbers here.
So could you kind of set the scene for us? You know, most of us have seen the post, but for anyone who hasn't, tell us a little bit about what your, what the background is, and ultimately, what was sort of the core message that you were getting across here.
Yeah, so I've been investing either on the angel side or on the fund side in pre-seed and seed for almost 5 years now. In this market environment, as we're actively looking at deals, we're one of the few funds that are still deploying. We write checks from $250K all the way to $1 million in early stage projects. And you could just feel the amount of consolidation, not only in projects, but also in investors. So in 22, 23, you had this mad rush to try to close deals, right? It was, let's close this in a week, 2 weeks. And if you didn't have an answer by the end of the second or third week, you probably weren't getting in the deal. Now, all of a sudden, you have 2 or 3 months. And then, firms will actually come back to you, projects will come back to you and say, hey, you guys still interested? We're still trying to fill out this round. And you're seeing it even for the most attractive projects. Now, that does differentiate from Series A and beyond, where it still is uber competitive. There's still a lot of firms, and they're also competing with Web 2 and Web 2.5 type firms, the Sequoias and other big guys of the world. Crypto VCs are really battling it out there if you're in the lead position. But if you are early stage, pre-seed, seed, the number of firms deploying has really, really shrunk. And that has an effect all the way downstream as, we need to fund those guys before they get to Series A and scale and really grow into those bigger valuations. So you're sort of seeing a freezing of that market. And that's really the genesis of the tweet.
Yeah, and it's less capital and less number of deals being done. So it's like both quantity of dollars and quantity of deals being done.
Yeah, and you can see this. So Galaxy publishes a report at the end of every quarter. It's lagged by a month or two after the quarter. And the number of deals has sharply decreased on the venture side. And this sort of mirrors what you're seeing in traditional venture as well. I think the stat was 80% of deals in the last quarter on traditional venture were in specifically AI and later stage, right? You're looking at those big deals, a lot of secondary transactions, and not really primary early stage funding. So the numbers in crypto VC are even more stark. In 2022, we had 5,300 firms, angels, and other investor types deploying. In the last 4 months of this year or so, we have under 400 net total investors. And this data is from the Avalanche guys who are really, really plugged in across the investor base. Talking with my peers and just gauging the reaction to this tweet, I think it's even worse than that, right? People have put together lists based on the folks who replied or yelled at me or did whatever, right? And we got to a number of names that's somewhere in like the 50 to 70-ish range in the pre-seed seed deployment category. Not many of those firms lead. So the way it generally works is, you'll have a great conversation with a startup. You need someone to set the terms, set the valuation, do a lot of the heavy lifting on the underwriting. Those follow-on firms will do their own DD, but the onerous part really is that lead investor. And so if I said 50 to 70 firms are kind of following on writing checks, the actual leads, there's probably 10 to 15 right now, because the firms that survive the last cycle are actually moving up to Series A and beyond and looking at a lot of different things that maybe aren't even crypto anymore.
And what's the rationale for why those previously early stage pre-seed seed investment firms are now moving up the stack Series A and beyond?
So I think one, it's the interest and the exit opportunities, right? The exit opportunities in, let's call it crypto adjacent things like AI, or maybe equity like businesses or verticals that have really hit it out of the park in prediction markets or stable coins, et cetera, have really de-risked the portfolios for these guys. So the ability to just transact in more sure things is much easier. The firms that have raised bigger funds, right? The Dragonflies of the world, the A16Zs, the Panteras, the Paradigms, who are working with 500 million plus. Frankly, it's really hard to write a $5-10 million check just because you got to write almost 100 of those things to get your fund deployed. And then that's a lot of work because you're really deploying over 3 or 4 years. So just the opportunities with scale really aren't there. And then 3, you had the folks who did decent or may have returned some capital to investors. The funding market has really just dried up for those kind of mediocre to somewhat successful firms. So either you really knocked it out of the park and then you raised a crap ton of money and you had to move up the stack, or you did okay to really bad and you weren't able to raise any money, and then no one's investing in sort of those pre-seed seed areas because it just doesn't make any sense in the opportunities of scale.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's also only a handful of those funds that are even able to manage those Series A sizes now too. Like there's only 5 to 6. You mentioned like 4 of them. I think there's like Framework and maybe Han in addition to that list that are going to be writing Series A checks now. So that's also happening. Hasib put out an interesting post in response to yours. I'm curious your take. Crypto is harder because it's winning. There are way more mature companies and products at scale today. This makes incumbents harder to unseat. Coinbase, Binance, Solana, Base, Hyperliquid, Tether, Circle. They're all bigger and better and more entrenched than they were just a few years ago, right? And it kind of goes on to say that there was a big blue ocean. The blue ocean has shifted. There's still opportunity, but the leaders of the market have been set. We're in this kind of maturing market evolution. This also comes as something that I think you'll find interesting when we were at ECC in Cannes a couple weeks back. You speak to founders who have raised a Series A, pre-token or even a non-token project. They have hope, they have activity, they have plenty of capital, they have a mindset of kind of like, we're just going to get through this. Actually, this bear market's not that bad compared to previous, especially if they've been around for 2022. The more pre-seed seed stage investors, founders who raised maybe a couple $1 million, they have a look in their eye of kind of like, I'm struggling to raise Series A because I'm not getting that much traction. And like, you can kind of feel the worry. And that was my read on the ground, speaking to a ton of different founders for like 5 to 6 days in France. So kind of these two things happening where like there's these Series A companies that are, getting through this bear in a much stronger and resilient and perhaps experienced way than previous. You've got the early stage pre-seed seed guys struggling to raise their next round and also kind of looking at a dark tunnel. And then you've got like these major winners who everyone is obviously trying to invest and find that next kind of incumbent for an upcoming category. That's kind of like the context that I wanted to provide, some of that coming from Hasib. Just curious your takes on this.
So I generally agree with Hasib that there are a lot of winners, which is fantastic for us as investors. We need exit opportunities and we want the space to grow. So fantastic. A lot of those winners are concentrated almost uniformly in the US. There are a few winners outside of the US, but the capital markets in the US have allowed those companies to grow to the likes of things that could be compared to S&P 500 type companies. So the opportunities are not as easy, to his point. You can't just kind of go to the local meetup in SF or some happy hour in New York and likely find the next startup, right? You got to travel to the off the beaten paths. You got to have unique and interesting theses that other people aren't underwriting. You have to look at different verticals, find different founders that are coming out. And, the talent crunch is certainly real in the space. Before there was this huge amount of riches and opportunity you saw mostly through tokens. And folks were attracted to that, right? Like kids out of Harvard were thinking about, writing the next DeFi protocol because it's, hey, we can make a ton of money doing it. Now there's a bit of a stigma that contracts the talent pool. Then you have this big incumbent in AI where a lot of venture dollars are going across the board. And it's much easier to just go do that. So talent certainly contracted. There's a lot of opportunities, but you really, really have to go out of your way to find new and interesting projects, founders, verticals. But I think it's more of a right sizing than a reckoning on the industry. It's coming back to the amount of investable capital that should be here for an industry that still is, a very small asset class in the grand scheme of things when you compare us to equities, bonds, real estate, commodities, whatever, right? There shouldn't be trillions or even hundreds of billions of venture dollars for the space that's only X Bitcoin, $1.5 trillion. So I think it's a right sizing more than anything else.
We had someone comment here just live as you were explaining that last answer there, where this person says that they have a few friends. They're putting out teasers for some of the products that they're building, but haven't really gotten the sort of traction with VCs that they may be looking for. What are you looking for when it comes to deploying and some of the other guys that are doing pre-seed, seed? What is it that is catching interest and traction?
Yeah, so and part of this post is, because there's so many less VCs, you have the ability to be more picky. So there are firms that underwrite pitch decks, founders, ideas, and that used to be far more prevalent in previous cycles because you suddenly could get, with just a basic idea and some wireframes and a few smart devs, to product really quickly and be differentiated and launch a token, and all of a sudden you were 50, 100x before you even knew it. Now that is a very long path, and you have these more traditional minded folks coming in and underwriting on traditional business metrics, which is exciting for someone like me, right? It kind of, the DeFi mullet thesis, right? We're kind of doing all the cool back end stuff with crypto and the boring, fun things that consumer people like to have on the front end, like that build a great user experience. Like no one has to know that it's crypto on that side of the table. And that's really where the businesses are winning today. And to win there, you have to have traditional metrics like, hey, user acquisition, what are my user acquisition costs? How many users am I getting? What's the ARR? What is my moat? What is my runway? Just like very traditional business metrics you'd find in, underwriting any investment you'd make personally, but things that we just didn't look at previously because it was more like, hey, can this token 100x? Hey, can I get my investment back before everyone else? Hey, what's the vesting period? Which was really the underwriting criteria of 2022. And if you look at a lot of the projects from there, right, they had these huge candles up and straight down, 95%. But the folks that were investing in that cycle had a huge amount of success doing that for a very concentrated period of time, and that's all they knew. And now those folks are out the door.
And Tom, is it accurate to say that you're looking now for founders that have already a product in the wild getting some traction that you could kind of apply a venture scale math or forecasting to a early set of traction? Like how much is the interest from your perspective in the folks that you've talked to for pre-product versus like, I have a product, it's kind of working, we're getting some traction, here's how we're gonna 10, 20x this? Where's your head at as far as the pre-product versus product with some traction?
So one of the reasons, and I'll get to your question, but just kind of walk folks through here, one of the reasons that funds are having a hard time raising is institutional capital is still a bit slow. And then the folks who funded, were the LPs for the last cycle in these venture funds, are really high net worth investors. And folks who made a lot of money in DeFi, made a lot of early investments in crypto, maybe early Bitcoin investors, et cetera, et cetera. Those folks lost a ton of money and they weren't able to underwrite these venture funds. And now that extends to these projects as well. If some venture investors are a little less likely to take that risk because they understand there's career risk involved or fund risk involved. Now, in terms of projects, those guys were also funding those projects and they were also early users of those projects. So as they've stepped back, there's this huge risk in pre-seed and seed now because you don't have that kind of battle-tested ability and the bar is higher for projects to get funded. So there are firms that are writing kind of checks based on a pitch deck, based on just the founder background. And some of those are fantastic based on who the founder is and what vertical they're attacking. But the bar is certainly higher, right? If we primarily invest in seed, less so in pre-seed. And the things we want to see are, some level of traction, some level of user adoption, someone actually paying for the product, And why do you have the right to win in the category that you're actually attacking? Is it distribution? Is it you as the founder? Is it some novel or interesting idea or technology you have? Usually less so there. Differentiation points are enormously important. A level of traction and sort of user adoption are front and center now more than they ever were.
Yeah. And Tom, how much of your emphasis is on revenue versus other metrics, right? Like, is it really a purely revenue game, or is it a metrics of other kind of focal points that you guys are really optimizing for?
Revenue for, let's call it non-DeFi related protocols, is generally hard to fake, right? If you're doing a bunch of copy trading on chain or just wash trading, whatever. There's a lot of ability to manipulate there, but if you're a more consumer focused application, it's pretty hard to fake revenue, pretty hard to fake user growth, pretty hard to fake adoption, and pretty hard to fake the actual product, right? I mean, one of the key things that we talk to founders about is, hey, I want to see, test, and use your product myself before I do anything else. Because if I don't like it, if I'm not interested in it, then why would anybody else be? And maybe I'm not the perfect consumer, but I can at least have a sense of like, this is interesting enough, this is well built enough, I understand the direction you guys are going with this. And in the past, I think there was a lot more aspirational look of where these things could be 6-12 months, starting from a baseline of 0. And now it's, hey, you got to get to level 3-4 before you even have a real conversation with a interested investor, just because of the dynamics I mentioned.
As we're thinking through where kind of the next underwriter comes from for some of these funds, I'm curious, as we're kind of thinking through, like, there was sort of this era of this, low float, high FDV, which, granted was a bit extractive, but did help to return capital and keep this VC complex going. And then you have Hyperliquid, which, was a massive win for those involved, but again, didn't have, a VC return. And then, had the liquid market decline. All of these things sort of lead to, kind of the collapse of who might be underwriting the new funds that are raising. And so as you're thinking through who the next underwriter is, are you going to, like, you go one level up the stack? Is it sovereign funds, institutional investors that might not be so crypto native? Where does that next investor in these funds come from?
Yeah, there's 2 levels of incremental dollar we have to worry about in the venture space. It's incremental dollars to actually buy the liquid tokens and protocols to support the ecosystem more broadly, and then the incremental dollars for the venture space that sort of start that whole flywheel that get those tokens actually out into the wild. So the incremental dollar on the retail side, I still think is coming through the RIA and investment advisor channel as they start to roll these things out. You guys have talked about this ad nauseum, right? Vanguard's now on board. Bank of America saying 1 to 3% allocation for crypto in your portfolios. Obviously the ETFs, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we're getting there, and I think folks underappreciate how much time that takes. It's quarterly meetings with like middle-aged old people that are slow to act. So it just takes a while. So whatever.
And a lot of education too.
Yeah, and the more volatility that happens, it slows down the conversation again. Education, et cetera. Yeah. Then on the venture, so I think we're getting there on that side. Great. Now on the venture side, there's less large LPs, high net worth individuals who are really super curious. There still are some because they kind of recognize, hey, this asset class is not dying. It is probably going to bounce back. I mean, that's the one of the most interesting things about crypto. It always seems to bounce back to all-time highs again, and folks recognize that after 10 years plus. So, the conversations we're having on the grounds across the world here as we're traveling and talking to folks is, hey, I know this thing's going to come back, but how do I get involved? And that's when you start the education journey is, okay, here's the liquid side, here's the venture side. So they're getting there. But, for us, we're funded as our lead LP for the first one with sovereign dollars out of the Middle East. And there's a lot of interested investors there because there's a huge amount of capital. And the risk for those guys really is, even if I put 0.5% of my huge portfolio in crypto adjacent stuff, or 1 or 2%, whatever, that kind of solves the problem. If this stuff really takes off and becomes the backbone of the internet economy, I have exposure. The risk for them is if it goes to 0, it's a rounding error for them. But if it goes to the entire backbone of everything we do, they just missed, the new internet, which is cliche, but really that's how they're thinking about it. So, a lot of these guys are just making smart allocations right now. Certainly wars and other things have their attention right now, but certainly a lot of the capital out of the Middle East, a lot of high net worth capital in Europe and in family offices and things like that are still very interested in crypto. Those folks have long sales cycles, takes time, but as you can tell from some of the big successful fundraisers, depending on your track record, you can certainly still get those dollars in the door.
Yeah. Is the war in the Middle East bottlenecking or slowing any of the flow of funds coming from some of those sovereign funds in the Middle East?
It's effectively dried up meetings, which has stopped the fundraising conversations. So the Middle East culture is very in person. You know, you'll sit down, you'll have coffee for hours, you'll get to know someone, you'll get to know their family, you'll talk about everything else but business for your first few meetings, and then, you know, all of a sudden you'll kind of circle back to, hey, here's what we're doing, why, and how it fits with your business. It's a very different way of doing business here than we do in the West, which is, you know, we have a lot of that, but it's much more transactional, right? What's your IRR? What's your track record? Who do you know? Why? How are you going to outperform? Fantastic. It's very much more of a trust-based relationship there. So you can't really do that over Zoom. You can't do that over Google Meet. Yeah. You have to be in person. You got to sit down and you got to meet everyone and their family and all that other good stuff. So that's really what slowed things down is, hey, if there's drones flying around Dubai and Kuwait and Qatar and all this stuff, it's exploding. People are not sitting down to have a coffee or a beer with you. So that's really where the slowdown's been.
Yeah. Tom, I actually quote tweeted your post with a graphic from Blockworks, and it shows the total crypto deal count right now as of April 2026, about at 50 deals per month as far as fundraising goes, down from over 200 at the peak, as you mentioned, in 2021, 2022. The decline has decelerated, but is consistently declining. It's not quite as low as the 2018 to 2020 market, about double that, so about 25 to 50. Do you anticipate this to turn around here or to stop? I mean, I put, is the crypto VC funding bottom finally in? This is in terms of quantity of deals. What do you anticipate from here throughout the rest of the year?
I anticipate this being pretty steady because just looking at the pipeline of my peers, I know where. So everything. The first starting point is everything in venture is dramatically lagged. We've made one or two investments a month since I joined almost a year ago, and I don't even know if half of those have been posted on CryptoRank or wherever public platforms are. Just because firms don't. There's not really like a need to post it unless you're doing it for some marketing purposes or you're trying to gain incremental dollars for your next round or whatever. So there's a huge lag in that data. That being said, right now there are almost no funds that are being raised, maybe a handful that haven't announced yet. So the level of capital that's already there, which is a decent amount, right? And you've heard the names that have announced, Dragonfly, DBA, Escape Velocity, a bunch of these guys have a good amount of capital. Dragonfly, yeah, exactly. So they'll all be deploying. We still have capital, we're still deploying, but that's not going to be a sharp inflection because of new funds that are coming into the space or new funds that have raised these mega funds. So I expect the current level of deals and dollar amount to continue, and if anything, to continue to concentrate in the later stages because that de-risks a lot of these investor portfolios, and that's really where they have to invest. So for pre-seed and seed, I would say, the takeaways here are really value test what you want to do, establish some level of product market fit. And once you do, there are interested investors, but the bar is certainly much higher than it used to be.
Tom, last thing I got for you is, it feels as if they might be relaxing some of these accredited investor laws. This is something that the CFTC sort of pointed to as one of the, as they're kind of going through the rule book, this is one of the things that they might clear up. I guess the question here is, do you think anyone can be a VC? Like, does, if everyone's got, the power of AI and the internet, knowledge at their fingertips, do they have what it takes to, do some due diligence and research and properly allocate their own capital?
We're not that special. VCs are not that special. And, so I think this is actually a problem. This is a weird problem, right? So everyone was a VC in 21 and 22. And everyone wants to be a VC until they realize that VC timelines are a decade or 7 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. Now, if you have a selection bias for projects or, other types of firms that have a short exit path to liquidity, which is what we were self-selecting for a long time, right? Like, what's my vesting schedule? What, when can I get my tokens? How quickly can I dump? That sets up a poisonous investment environment and a poisonous environment for these firms to actually grow, right? The whole reason that you have this 1-year cliff plus 3-year vest as the standard is that you need these companies to have some light of sight into capital planning and to actually have time to hit the runway to accelerate. Now, does it have to be 4 years? I think that's probably too long. Is 2 years fine? 3 years fine? Probably, right? Is 18 months fine? I don't know, maybe, but it's not 3 months, which is what, a lot of these unlocks used to be. So I think everyone can be a VC. They probably have the tools and interest if you've been in this space and you've built a deep network. And that's why we have a lot of angel investors in this space. And if you go to San Fran, you throw a rock, you hit an angel investor for AI pretty quickly. So it's anyone could be an investor if you have the capital. It's just, do you have the patience? And that's really the advantage of VC and these vehicles that we put these things in, right? Is because, you need the patience to actually see the companies through.
Yeah. And I also think that you're right on that the types of allocators coming in now are not operating on the 3 to 5 year horizon as much as previous allocators have been. It's more of the 10+ year horizon, the 5 to 10 year horizon.
It's crazy. I mean, I remember pitch decks from 21, 22, where these funds were saying, we're going to get you your capital back in 1 year, and then everything else is gravy and upside. And it's like, okay, that's crazy, right? But that's 5,000 investors raised on a thesis like that. So who are the crazy ones, the LPs or the funds? I don't know.
Well, Tom, I think you kind of reignited crypto VC in some way. I've seen some solid decks. I've seen some interest from friends asking me this week if I have any deals on my table, what I'm looking at, et cetera. So whether it's just a little bit of a market balance or kind of conversation, we haven't done very many deals at all in the last 6 months. I think we're kind of part of the same situation here. So wishing you the best, and it seems like a good opportunity to be an investor if you have capital, if you have the ability to find good deals, and to actually recognize what a good deal is. So actually seems positive for most of the space who is still around. And I think that was kind of what you were really trying to get at.
Yeah, I think this is going to be, we're talking fund vintages, which is the year that, you start investing in your fund. And, I think this year and last year are going to be really historic vintages on par with, some of the early crypto funds. So yeah, we're actively investing, happy to share deals with our peers, happy to chat to new and interesting founders. Just from this post alone, we got over 150 or so decks this week. So, hey, there's a lot of people still making things, which is awesome. So I love to see it.
There you go.
Tom, what is that above your shoulder? Is that a golf course? What golf course is that?
It is. It's I'm up here in Boston. It's a golf course called Charles River. They play the amateur between the country club and then there most times. So
beautiful.
Lucky enough to be able to shoot 110 there every few weeks.
Tom, I just sent you a deal, man. Thanks for coming on.
We got to get around.
I appreciate your time.
Let's get around.
Yes, let me know.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, cheers, buddy.
Thank you.
Yep.
All righty, guys. That was sombering, but that was the reality, man. I mean, it is a good time to be allocating if you have some money left. I mean, it is. It's just the combination of the business metric kind of evolution of looking at teams and founders from that lens, the market dynamics, the token dynamics, the time frame, all of these factors coming together just makes it tough to be a early stage founder right now. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, you know what? I always thought oh man, should have just launched a token, man. Would have been great, and then it's just dude, why? A lot of the token projects are in a tough spot right now. But this happens every bear market. Tokens are bad.
Yeah, it's not a bear market anymore.
Yeah,
no, I think
winter's over.
I think that's right. A lot of them are over, struggling with runway. Haven't heard from a lot of the Rollup Portco projects in a little while. Might have to make the rounds. Yeah, no, just closing thought on Tom is, the nature of VC is that it's supply and demand, right? So if founders are having a bit of a tough time to raise capital, it means that VCs can be a bit more selective and can usually squeeze a better deal. Tokens have come down and sort of had a reality check in terms of the valuation that they're raising at. I did a deal recently. I think I was telling you about it. It's very small, 15 mil FTV, in terms of the round that they're raising. They've already got some traction. So That was pretty cool to see. I'm excited about that one. And this thing would have been 50 plus,
Yeah,
you know,
easily.
6 to
And filled
12
quickly.
months ago, and filled
Yeah.
instantly, right?
Yeah.
So, no, I think this is just like you said. It's sobering. It's a reality check, but I think it is. I think it's the new reality that we're going to be headed for in the next few months. Maybe we get a raging bull. VC complex comes back. New founders, raise much higher. But I think this is where we're at here for the next bit.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being a part of the show today. Big show tomorrow, big show Thursday, big show Friday. See you guys tomorrow. The winter's over. Hang on to your hats.
It's a big week.
Cheers to you.
80
Enjoy
degrees in the
yourself.
tower. Cheers.
All righty, guys.